Chapter 1509. What danger was there in the Suicide Valley? When the ancestor heard this, he couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Fear appeared between the brows of the fog and the dark night. The danger of the Suicide Valley is definitely not something that can be explained in a few words. This must start from the origin of the Suicide Valley. The ancestor said slowly. Xiaobai nodded and said, "That's right. Why is there no information about the Suicide Valley in my memories?" The ancestor said, "Your Majesty, what you have inherited is the memories of the royal family. You only have information about the past of the heavens beyond heaven, and the Suicide Valley did not exist since ancient times. It was only formed after the betrayal of that traitor." "How did it form?" Xiaobai asked curiously. "Why did the Suicide Valley become a place of great danger?" "That's because this land has been corroded by poisonous substances. Every blade of grass, every tree, every piece of soil and every rock is highly poisonous." Highly poisonous. Tang Zheng and Xiaobai both shivered at the same time. Their eyes narrowed as they stared at the hard rock beneath their feet. Could it be that the rock beneath their feet also contained poison? But why were they safe and sound? The ancestor looked deeply at the two of them and guessed what they were thinking. However, he was not in a hurry to explain. Instead, he said step by step, "All of this is the traitor's scheme. Back then he relied on his own strength and those vicious subordinates of his. It was impossible for him to be a match for the late emperor. However, he was too cunning and the late emperor trusted him so much that he fell into his trap." "What trap?" This was about the history of the royal family. Xiaobai was completely interested. The traitor lied that according to ancient legends, there was a peerless divine weapon hidden under this land. Moreover, it was rumored that this divine weapon was related to the safety of the country. In order to stabilize the country and protect the people of the world, the late emperor led most of his men into this mountain range in an attempt to find the divine weapon. However, no one expected that this was completely the traitor's scheme. This mountain range had long been poisoned and everyone was infected with the poison. Most of them directly died, and even if they didn't die after experiencing an endless battle with the enemy, they were all killed and injured. After hearing that, Tang Jing, Xiaobai, and even the wild dog felt a chill in their hearts at the same time. They looked around as if they had traveled through tens of thousands of years of history and witnessed the bloody battle. Even though they had only heard a few words, they could still feel the tragedy at that time. "I stayed in the imperial city to deal with government affairs and escaped a calamity. I didn't fulfill my duty as a subject and allowed that traitor to take advantage of me," the old ancestor said regretfully. "Even the late emperor didn't see through his scheme and he didn't survive either. If you go, I'm afraid that the traitor will catch all of you in one fell swoop. Today I won't be able to hear these secrets of the past." Xiaobai comforted. The old ancestor's eyes lit up as he felt slightly comforted. "Your Majesty, you're wrong about one thing. How could the late emperor be killed so easily? Although the traitor had exhausted all means, the former emperor still managed to successfully leave this place and return to the imperial city. It's just that he was already heavily injured." Xiaobai was shocked. He didn't expect his father to be so powerful. Under the traitor's meticulous scheme, he was still able to escape. The late emperor originally had a chance to recover, but the traitor was too cunning. He immediately sent a group of extremely vicious people to attack the imperial city. In order to protect his subordinates, His Majesty fought to his last breath and saved many of his subordinates, including the empress and the child in her womb. Xiaobai became emotional. It turned out that his father had used his own life in exchange for his own. He couldn't understand his father's feelings at that time, but he must have been extremely sad and disappointed. After all, he had been betrayed by the person he trusted the most. His father's country had also been lost in his hands. Xiaobai clenched his teeth. A ball of flame emerged from his palm and kept rolling. This was a flame of anger, as if it could devour everything. "You must have seen the cemetery on your way here. Those are the warriors who followed His Majesty here and fought to their last breaths." Tang Zheng and Little White were suddenly enlightened. Previously they were still curious about who was buried in the tombs, and the fog kept saying that they were warriors. It turned out that they were all people who were loyal to the imperial family. They were buried here for the imperial family. I will not forget them. In the future the imperial family will also not forget them," Xiaobai said with a heavy tone. The old ancestor looked at Xiaobai with gratification and gratitude. he said emotionally. If they knew of His Majesty's intentions in the underworld, they would have died without regrets. For a moment the atmosphere became heavy and oppressive. Xiaobai took a deep breath and broke the silence. He said, "Old ancestor, what happened after that? Since this land had already been corroded by poison, why did you come here? Weren't you worried? After the late emperor covered for us to escape, he had no fixed residence and was immediately divided into two factions. Some suggested that we immediately counterattack, while others suggested that we hide, accumulate strength and plan slowly. I was in the latter faction while the general was in the first faction." The general. Yes, the general's cultivation was powerful, and he came from the oldest family in the realm beyond heaven, the Red Moon clan. Wait. Before the old ancestor could finish, Tang Jing quickly raised his hand and interrupted him. "Old ancestor, the Red Moon clan that you mentioned, are you talking about the Red Moon beast?" The old ancestor looked at Tang Jing in shock. He did not expect that an outsider like him would mention the Red Moon beast. After all, it had been tens of thousands of years. Most people in the realm beyond heaven had forgotten about the existence of the Red Moon beast. "How do you know?" The old ancestor stared at Tang Jing and asked. "Not only do I know, but I have also seen the members of the Red Moon clan. In fact, there is more than one of them," Tang Jing said in a deep voice. "What?" The old ancestor stood up and looked down at Tang Jing. His eyes were wide open as he asked in disbelief, "How could you possibly have seen a member of the Scarlet Moon clan? Didn't they all sacrifice themselves?" "Master is not the only one who has seen them. I've seen them too," Xiaobai interrupted. "You have seen the king as well?" Or, the old ancestor was even more shocked. "In another world. Perhaps the general that you mentioned is the one that we have seen." Tang Jing was deep in his thoughts. The Red Moon beast's identity was not simple. Back then he came to the human world to look for the queen and the prince. Due to the time and space turbulence, he was separated from his wife. He was sealed forever while his wife fell into Xian Yin's hands. "Master, you tell us." Xiaobai took the initiative to let Tang Jing speak so that the others would listen to him. Tang Jing took the hint and began to talk about how he met the Scarlet Moon beast. Naturally, he also mentioned Xian Yin, causing everyone to perk up their ears and listen with great interest. Chapter 15:10. After Tang Jing finished speaking, there was complete silence. Everyone was reminiscing about the soul-stirring and scheming struggles of the human world. Although only a few words had described the tip of the iceberg, it still made people feel the magnificence and ruthlessness of it. The patriarch heaved a long sigh. That traitor even sent people to another world. In order to stabilize his rule, he really did everything he could. If it weren't for his willful rebellion back then, the realm beyond heaven wouldn't be in such a precarious situation. Since the Red Moon General is not dead, then everything will be easy. Our strength will become stronger. The great ancestor was full of beautiful expectations for the future. Tang Jing did not feel optimistic. The Red Moon General's strength was greatly reduced when he traveled through space. It will take some time to recover his former strength. The great ancestor did not care at all. "I believe the Red Moon General will be able to do it." Tang Jing helplessly bitterly smiled and bitterly shut his mouth. Fortunately, the queen's decision was wise. She let me and the Red Moon General each lead a group of subordinates to prepare for both sides. One group followed the general's advice and directly confronted the traitor. The other group, led by me, went into hiding. Moreover, in order to ensure the safety of both sides are not allowed to contact each other. Otherwise, the enemy would have been powerful and we would have been wiped out by them. The great ancestor sighed. So it was the queen's idea. Tang Jing suddenly realized that the queen's decision was wise. Xiaobai's father and the queen were not ordinary people. Their foresight was so accurate. "You still haven't told us how you can hide in this place that is eroded by poison?" Tang Jing asked the key question. Xiaobai also looked at the great ancestor with a curious look. The great ancestor continued, "We chose to hide in many places, but we did not find the best place to hide. Later, I missed the warriors who died here and came here to pay respects. However, I accidentally found something strange." "What's strange?" "The periphery of this place is highly poisonous. However, once you step into the core area, the poison disappeared as if it was dissolved by some mysterious force. Since the war, this place has changed a lot. It is impossible to fly above the mountain range, so if you want to reach the core area, You have to pass through the ground. With my insignificant abilities, I reached the hinterland with difficulty and entered the core of the battle. I saw the brutality of the battle that day. Corpses were everywhere and countless former comrades were lying in pools of blood, turning into cold, hard corpses. The great ancestor's eyes involuntarily turned red as if there were tears in them. It was as if he saw the original scene. The grief and shock in his heart could be imagined. Tang Jing understood the ancestor's feelings very well, but he still had a bellyful of questions that had yet to be answered. For example, what dissolved the poison? Since there was poison outside, why were they not affected when they came in? Why couldn't they fly in this mountain range and could only enter on foot? At the same time, Tang Jing was also glad that he chose to enter on the ground instead of flying in the air. Otherwise, if he fell into a place filled with poison, he would have died before he could even see the ancestor. Tang Jing simply threw these questions to the ancestor. The ancestor looked deeply at Tang Jing, unable to hide his admiration. He thought to himself that this person's vision was unique, his thoughts were meticulous, and he was not simple at all. The ancestor did not hide anything and explained again. In the eyes of the traitor, this place had already become the suicide valley. Moreover, the traitor had killed so many of his former comrades in the trenches. This was his stain and he did not want to come to this place again. In fact, he did not want anyone else to come to this place either. Then this place would become a place forgotten by the world, a natural shelter. The ancestor and the others gathered everyone's strength and finally managed to pass through the outer poison grounds with great difficulty. They arrived at the hinterland and settled down there. They were self-sufficient and must have lived in seclusion for tens of thousands of years. Unless they occasionally sent spies out to gather information under normal circumstances, they would never leave the suicide valley. After so many years, the outside world did not discover that the opposition was actually in the suicide valley. As for the rumors of the opposition, the ancestor had purposely let his subordinates spread them out. This was to increase the fear of the traitors and create psychological pressure on them. The ancestor did not wish to see the traitor sit peacefully and enjoy the world. The rumors of the opposition had indeed caused quite a bit of trouble for the enemy. However, they could not find any traces of the opposition even after digging 3 feet into the ground. The more this situation was, the more they felt tormented. This was the effect that the ancestor wanted. He believed that as long as he did not reveal anything, the enemy would definitely not be able to guess where they were hiding. It was a complete accident that the wild dog found out that the opposition was hiding in the suicide valley. This kind of situation had never happened before. After all these years of analysis and research, the ancestor already had some insights into why the suicide valley would automatically dissolve the poison. He remembered the rumors about the divine armament back then. This matter was not groundless. That was why the traitor was able to deceive the late emperor. Otherwise, with the late emperor's intelligence and wisdom, it would be impossible for him to fabricate a lie out of thin air to successfully deceive him. The changes in the suicide valley might be inextricably linked to the mysterious divine armament. In addition, the things that happened in the past few years also confirmed the ancestor's guess. That was, there were more and more places in the suicide valley that had been dissolved by the poison, and the area that could be inhabited was expanding bit by bit. Now only the outermost area was still poisonous. The fog could transform into fog and the night could transform into darkness. They could effectively avoid the effects of the poison. Therefore, they had been taking turns to monitor the situation outside the suicide valley. Not a single movement could escape their eyes. All of this should be the effect of the divine armament. In the long run, all the poison will be dissolved and we will be in danger of being exposed. In addition, our strength is deteriorating and it might be related to the divine armament. I have been thinking of a solution recently. The crux of all this is the divine armament. If we can find the divine armament, perhaps all of this can be solved. The ancestor said in distress. All of this came down to the divine armament. Tang Jing had already come into contact with many divine armament. His heart skipped a beat. Could he find this divine armament? Chapter 15:11. Seeing that everyone's eyes were focused on him, Tang Jing thought for a while and then said without giving in, I don't have full confidence in finding this divine armament, but I can give it a try? Will it really succeed? The ancestor asked nervously and expectantly. Xiao Bai said without hesitation, of course, Master is very resourceful. Not to mention finding a divine armament, he can do even more difficult things. In Xiao Bai's eyes, Tang Jing was practically synonymous with omnipotence. Tang Jing didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard this. He better not let down Xiao Bai's trust, otherwise he would really make a fool of himself at that time. The ancestor and the others were clearly skeptical. Moreover, there were a lot of doubts. Unknowingly, the sky was getting brighter. The Suicide Valley woke up from its slumber and gradually regained its vitality. Since they were looking for the divine armament, they had to have a comprehensive and detailed understanding of the Suicide Valley. Thus, the group left the waterfall and walked back to the bottom of the sky. The waterfall was right behind them. The waterfall was still black, and under the illumination of the morning sun, it gave off a different kind of radiance. What's going on with this waterfall? Why is it black? Tang Jing asked curiously. The ancestor glanced at the waterfall and said, "This waterfall was contaminated by poison back then and has always contained a highly toxic poison. If you drink a little, you will die on the spot. This waterfall is equivalent to our last line of defense. If we have no other choice and are discovered by the enemy, it will be very difficult for the enemy to break through this waterfall if we can't avoid it. But if that's the case, it will become a situation of certain death. There will be no way out. If the enemy continues to surround us, we will easily be trapped to death." Tang Jing spoke bluntly, pointing out the shortcomings in an instant. The ancestor blushed and said resentfully, "We know this as well. This is our last resort." Tang Jing immediately realized that he was being too abrupt and said embarrassedly, "Ancestor, I was just saying it casually. Don't mind it." The ancestor rolled his eyes and said, "Do you think I would be so petty?" The fog also chimed in, "The ancestor is magnanimous, why would he care about these few words?" "That's true." Tang Jing echoed with a smile. The ancestor really didn't care. He continued to answer Tang Jing's question and said, "When the waterfall was opened last night, you must have seen the changes in the waterfall. When the waterfall is divided into two, the black water will become incomparably clear. This is the only time when the waterfall is not poisonous." "How can a waterfall not be poisonous?" This time Xiao Bai couldn't help but ask in surprise. One moment it was highly toxic, the next it wasn't. It was indeed confusing. Xiao Bai nodded and said, "I haven't figured it out yet. Only when the waterfall is opened will it be poisonous." "Then why did you think of opening the waterfall?" Mi Wu said worshipfully, "This is all thanks to the ancestor. When we first arrived here, we didn't have a place to stay. It was the ancestor who suddenly thought of something and used his divine ability to open this waterfall. That's how we were able to live here and shelter ourselves from the wind and rain." "Patriarch, you're truly amazing," Xiao Bai praised. Looking at Xiao Bai's sincere eyes, the elder ancestor's face turned even redder. He said embarrassedly, "Your Majesty is too kind. Actually, there is something I haven't told everyone." "What is it?" "It's very absurd to say, but it wasn't my sudden idea. Dad, I had a dream. There was a voice in the dream and that voice told me how to open the waterfall." The elder ancestor's words were earth-shattering, causing everyone to be shocked. It was actually a dream that told him the method. Dreaming was very normal, but the key was that the dream came true, which was very unusual. Mi Wu could hear the sound of his heart breaking. This wasn't the elder ancestor's credit, but that dream's credit. In order to maintain this group, the elder ancestor had to make everyone trust his strength. That was why he didn't dare to say it directly. Otherwise, if others questioned his strength, this group would easily fall apart. Now that His Majesty had returned, this problem no longer existed. That was why he could say it so calmly. "A dream," Tang Jing muttered to himself. His eyes couldn't help but fall on the waterfall. Every time the waterfall is opened, the water from the waterfall that isn't poisonous is available for us to drink. This ensures our survival. The elder ancestor continued to talk non-stop. "Later on, I tried to recall this dream, but I could only remember that voice and not anything else. I've studied the waterfall for countless years, but I still can't figure it out. I don't know where that voice came from. Moreover, since then I've never had a similar dream again and I've never heard that voice again. This is really strange." Xiao Bai nodded. He looked at Tang Jing and said, "Master, did you find anything?" Tang Jing shook his head and said, "Since we found something suspicious, then let's start from the waterfall. Everyone suspects that the antidote to the poison is that divine weapon. When this waterfall is opened, it can automatically purify the poison. It is very likely that it is inextricably linked to that divine weapon. So, it is most suitable to start from the waterfall. Miwu rolled his eyes and said, "You said that you will start from the waterfall, but do you think you will have any results? The elder ancestor has studied it for many years without any results. Don't think that with just a few words and a silver tongue, you will have any results." Miwu had always been prejudiced against Tang Jing. Tang Jing ignored her ridicule and said indifferently, "Whether or not there will be any results, we will only know after we try." "Then we will see you try." Tang Jing was also eager to try. "Let's try who's afraid of who." Retreating in the face of difficulties is not my Tang Jing's style. He walked straight to the waterfall. There was a deep pool under the waterfall. It was like a big bottle of ink, incomparably dark. He walked around the deep pool. The waterfall did not have any strange smell. Other than the color, it was no different from ordinary water. He reached his hand into the water. Miwu exclaimed, "Are you trying to commit suicide? That water is highly poisonous." Tang Jing smiled without turning his head and said, "Of course I know." He had encountered many kinds of water. The water of the river Styx in the ghost realm and the water of the sea of bitterness. He had turned the danger into safety every time. Moreover, water was the source of life. Could reflect many things. His hand stopped a few millimeters away from the surface of the water, and a strange feeling immediately spread to his palm. Poison. He immediately determined. This poison was really strong. Before he even came into contact with it, he actually had a reaction. He did not retract his hand. This bit of poison could not hurt him. He turned around and looked at other places. This was the hinterland of the Suicide Valley. The other places had been purified and did not have any poison. Only this waterfall still had poison. This was especially different. If you can't see it, then stop pretending. If it was that simple, why would you wait so many years? Miwu said jokingly, attacking Tang Jing. Tang Jing smiled slightly and did not care. "Miwu!" the elder ancestor shouted. Miwu curled his lips and finally did not dare to do it again. Chapter 15:12. Plop. A splash appeared in the deep pool. Everyone stared at the splash with their mouths agape. "Ah!" Exclamations rang out. No one had expected this. Tang Jing had actually jumped into the deep pool. One had to know that the water was highly poisonous and was extremely harmful to people. Even if one's strength was profound, it would still affect them to a certain extent. Xiao Bai was also shocked by this unexpected scene. He hurriedly rushed to the edge of the pool as if he wanted to jump in as well. "Your Majesty, you mustn't." The ancestor quickly stopped Xiao Bai. He was incomparably anxious. "Your Majesty, this deep pool contains highly toxic poison. You mustn't be rash." "But Master has already jumped in. If I don't go down and investigate, how can I be at ease? If anything happens to him, then I can't be by his side to protect him. I can't absolve myself from the blame," Xiao Bai said with grief. Although the ancestor had already expected Xiao Bai's loyalty to Tang Jing, he was still deeply shocked when he heard his words. This loyalty far exceeded his expectations. As a high and mighty and incomparably proud member of the royal family, shouldn't he ask others to express their loyalty to him? How could he be so loyal to others? The ancestor's worldview was almost overturned. Since Tang Jing was temporarily not here, the ancestor felt that as an old official, whether it was for the sake of the royal family or the late emperor, he had the obligation and responsibility to remind His Majesty of this point. The royal family's dignity was inviolable. "Your Majesty, you mustn't. You're a member of the royal family. You're His Majesty. How can you put yourself in danger?" The ancestor persuaded earnestly. Before he could finish, Xiao Bai had already rudely interrupted his words. "Ancestor, you don't have to say any more. He's my master. For him, I'm willing to sacrifice my life. How can I stop at a mere deep pool?" Xiao Bai cleverly went past the ancestor and tried to jump into the deep pool. How could the ancestor ignore him? He hooked his claws and stopped him. When the fog and the night saw this, they hugged Xiao Bai at the same time. At this moment of life and death, the two of them could not care less about the crime of offending their superiors. Xiao Bai was restrained and roared angrily, "Let go of me. Your Majesty, we are all thinking for you." The three of them said earnestly, I can be responsible for my own decisions. I don't need you to tell me what to do. Besides, don't you all respect me as His Majesty? How dare you disobey my orders? Xiao Bai was flustered and exasperated. He never thought that they would try so hard to stop him. Wasn't this preventing him from being loyal to his master? This was framing him for being heartless and unjust. Xiao Bai was an indomitable spirit. How could he be a heartless and unjust rascal? The two sides were in a stalemate. One side was trying hard to jump into the deep pool, while the other side was desperately holding on to him. The wild dog witnessed this scene with his mouth agape. His worldview was deeply subverted. He could not help but have thousands of words to say in his heart. What did that Tangjing do to make His Majesty so loyal to him? Was there some kind of drug? The wild dog's imagination ran wild. He did not know how this farce would end. Your Majesty, if you jump into the deep pool, we'll jump in with you. Anyway, if something happens to your Majesty, we won't be able to live in this world anymore. In the end, the ancestor had no choice but to use a trump card. Coercion and bribery. Little White immediately gave up struggling. It looked at the patriarch with reddened eyes, and its eyes involuntarily turned red. He could understand the ancestor's motives and thoughts, but the ancestor could not know his true thoughts and his unusual feelings for Tangjing. That was why all these differences were caused. Boom. A loud noise came from the deep pool, interrupting this scene. They all turned their heads to look at the deep pool, their eyes firmly attracted. Gurgle. The deep pool began to boil like boiling water. Dense black gas spiraled up into the sky like smoke from a kitchen chimney. It had a unique charm. What had happened in the deep pool? How could there be such a change? Countless questions popped up in everyone's mind, especially the ancestor. He had observed the deep pool for tens of thousands of years and had never seen such a strange scene. How could Tangjing do it? No one knew the danger Tangjing had experienced. He was almost walking along the gates of hell. If he was careless, he would definitely die. Just now he took the risk to jump into the deep pool. It was not on a whim. He was definitely not seeking his own death. When he placed his hand on the surface of the pool, he not only felt the strong poison, but also a trace of the special characteristics of the pool water. Different types of water had similar special characteristics, and this pool water was no exception. It had many of the special characteristics of water. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be helpless. But Tangjing was different. He cultivated the dragon god art and had truly transformed into a dragon. He had a true dragon avatar, so his understanding of water was far superior to ordinary people. After all, the dragon clan was able to control the clouds and rain, and they liked to live in the water. They were very sensitive to water. He took full advantage of this advantage. His divine sense entered the water and spread along the water droplets, quickly spreading deeper into the deep pool. His divine sense spread deeper and deeper. Fortunately, his divine sense was strong enough, and because he was a dragon, he had a natural affinity with water. His ability to control water was very strong, so his divine sense could reach a depth that others could not reach. This deep pool was really bottomless, as if there was no end. It made people feel a sense of loss. Was there any meaning in doing this? Fortunately, he was confident in his own judgment, which was why he persevered and continued to explore. Suddenly, bang! A mysterious force rebounded from the deep pool and fiercely hit his divine sense. It was as if his divine sense had encountered a spring and was quickly bounced away. Tangjing did not give up. Instead, his eyes lit up as if he had discovered a new continent. If there was no reaction, he might have given up. But since there was a mysterious force rebounding his divine sense, it meant that there was something strange in this deep pool. But divine sense was divine sense after all and could not replace a real person to explore. Moreover, once his divine sense entered the deep pool, it would be rebounded by the mysterious force. There was no way to go any further, and there was no way to obtain more information. In this way, no matter how he tried, there would not be much effect. Therefore, he decided to take the risk and jump into the deep pool himself. He would personally go to the bottom of the pool to explore. Maybe the divine weapon would be at the bottom. Of course, he was not completely reckless and did not care about his own life. He had other considerations. He was already a member of the dragon clan, and his ability to control water was absolutely first class. The pool water was highly toxic, but he could completely use the Dragon Clan's magical power to completely resist the corrosion of the pool water and isolate the toxicity, so he would not be hurt. Chapter 15:13. When Tang Jing entered the water, the surrounding poison quickly gathered in his body, trying to erode every cell and nerve in his body. 10:8. However, Tang Jing hurriedly activated the Dragon God technique. A bubble immediately appeared around him, firmly enveloping him and isolating him from all the poisonous water. Tang Jing was slightly stunned. When he was in the South Sea, although he was like a fish in water, there was no such bubble. Could it be that this kind of change occurred after the Dragon God technique was promoted to a certain realm? He did not guess wrongly. This was the miraculous change that would occur after the Dragon God technique reached a certain realm. When he sensed the surrounding poison, the water avoidance pearl automatically produced, isolating all the threats around him, allowing him to be safe and sound. The others were not dragons, so of course they could not do all this. Even a powerhouse like the ancestor could not do anything. A pleasant surprise. Tang Jing was relieved and quickly dived down. The pressure of the water did not cause him any trouble at all. He dove down like a fish in water. From the outside, the pool did not look deep, but once he went down he could not see the bottom. Tang Jing's speed was extremely fast. After diving for a long time, he still did not reach the bottom. He was not worried. After all, he had probed with his divine sense before and knew the general situation. Moreover, his divine sense was not idle now and had already probed down. Bang! Suddenly his divine sense was bounced back. He was overjoyed. He had reached his destination. A faint light came from below. He could not help but squint his eyes slightly. Before he could stand firm, this light flew towards him with a whoosh. It was very sharp, causing people to involuntarily feel a chill in their hearts. He did not panic and quickly stabilized his mind. A golden light flew out from his palm and hit the light fiercely. Unexpectedly, the energy contained in this light was extremely domineering. Boom! With a loud sound, a surging wave of water tilted out from the point of impact. In the blink of an eye, the wave rushed to the surface of the water and splashed up huge waves. This movement was very loud and immediately attracted the attention of others. They all turned their heads to look over. Xiao Bai anxiously cried out, "Master!" After a slight pause, he shouted again, "I'm going to save Master." Old Rent hurriedly gave a look to the fog and dark night. The three of them held on to Xiao Bai tightly, not giving him a chance to break free. "Your Majesty, you can't do that." The ancestor begged with tears in his eyes. The situation in the deep pool was unclear and they didn't know the dangers. How could they let Xiao Bai go down without doing anything? If anything happened to him, they would not be able to redeem themselves even if they died 10,000 times. Xiao Bai struggled in despair. His eyes were filled with despair, but he knew very well that he really couldn't save anyone. He thought to himself, "Master, you've always been able to turn danger into safety. I hope you can create a miracle this time as well." Yes, Master will definitely succeed. Tang Zheng's situation was indeed very dangerous. As for whether he could turn the situation around, it was still unknown. The wave from before had completely disappeared, and before he could take another look, an even more powerful surge of energy surged towards him. He hurriedly circulated his energy to resist, but at this moment, the force had completely enveloped him. Kacha! The water avoidance pearl had actually shattered. This scene was unexpected. His mind went blank for a moment and then he knew that this meant that there was a huge danger. He wanted to activate the Dragon God mantra and create a new water avoidance pearl, but it was already too late. As he could only fight back. Puff! The light that contained surging power had already completely enveloped him. His body felt as if it had been slashed by a sharp blade. A wound appeared on the surface of his skin, but no blood flowed out. Tang Jing cultivated the chaotic Vajra spell and had an indestructible body. It was almost impossible for him to get external injuries, but this time he was indeed injured. Although there was no bleeding, only a wound was left on his body. This was no longer a normal situation. He was obviously stunned for a moment. He understood that he had underestimated the other party. His nerves were greatly stimulated and all his hair stood on end. The poison in the water was like a cat that smelled blood. It found a breakthrough and crazily surged towards the wound. The poison immediately seeped into his body from the wound. This poison was indeed extraordinary. No wonder it was able to defeat the imperial family back then. Tang Jing felt that his brain seemed to have slowed down a little. It was just the beginning, yet there was already such a huge reaction. It was almost unimaginable. He stabilized his mind and circulated the chaotic Vajra spell. His entire body glowed with a golden light, and the wound quickly healed, preventing the poison from further harming his body. Immediately after, the strange feeling in his brain was dispelled, and he quickly returned to his peak state. Swish. Sword light. The hidden profound sword in his hand released a huge amount of power, and the sword light slashed towards the ball of light. Before the hidden profound sword could hit, its speed had actually slowed down a little. This was because the surrounding water had become countless times thicker, like cement, showing signs of rapidly solidifying. Then how powerful was the hidden profound sword? Sword light surged. Bang bang bang. The surrounding water was stirred up into pieces and returned to its original state. The hidden profound sword broke free from its restraints and quickly, ruthlessly, and accurately struck the center of the ball of light. Clang. The sound of metal clashing suddenly rang out. It was deafening, comparable to a thunderclap. A powerful shockwave quickly spread out from the point of impact. He had no choice but to quickly retreat towards the surface of the water. He had no way to stabilize his body. Could be seen how terrifying the shockwave was. Hua! He splashed out the water and rushed into the air before stopping. He looked down at the deep pool from above. It was so small, but it actually had such a huge impact on him. It was truly unexpected. When the others saw him splash out the water, they were shocked. Xiao Bai could not hide his excitement and blurted out, "Pastor." Tang Zheng's gaze fell on Xiao Bai. He understood the anxiety in his eyes and comforted him. "Xiao Bai, don't worry." Xiao Bai nodded his head heavily and said ecstatically, "I knew Master would be safe and sound." The corner of Tang Zheng's mouth squeezed out a bitter smile. He was not really safe and sound, he was even injured by the light just now. The ancestor was already dumbstruck as he muttered to himself, "Impossible. Impossible. How could he be safe and sound?" It was not that no one had ever thought of going to the bottom of the water to investigate, but not long after entering the water, they were poisoned and lost their lives. The ancestor had once used his divine sense to enter the water to investigate, but his divine sense was not as strong as Tang Zheng's because Tang Jing cultivated the Ksiddhagarbha Sutra, which was a divine ability that specialized in cultivating the soul and divine sense. Therefore, his soul and divine sense were much stronger than many experts. The ancestor's divine sense was not able to investigate the ball of light, but Tang Jing did. It was precisely because of these factors that the ancestor and the others were so shocked. This was truly a slap in the face. Tang Jing alone was able to defeat the ancestor and the others. Chapter 15-14. Other than Xiao Bai, everyone else was exclaiming in their hearts that it was impossible, but the truth was right in front of them. There was no way to deny it. Fush. Another sound of water splashing rang out, interrupting their thoughts. A ball of light flew up from the water, heading straight for Tang Jing. Swoosh swoosh. The sword light suddenly appeared and hit the other party, the intense light even eclipsing the sunlight in the sky. Hiss. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. Previously, no one had seen the battle clearly, but now that they saw it with their own eyes and experienced it for themselves, they all felt their hearts tighten. This seemingly simple attack contained a terrifying power that was too frightening. Only now did they truly experience Tang Zheng's astonishing strength. The great ancestor had already fought with Tang Jing, so he knew very well how powerful he was. But he stared without blinking, wanting to know more about Tang Jing. In addition, he wanted to know more about that ball of light, the thing that he had always ignored. He couldn't help but feel ashamed, asking himself, why did he overlook such an obvious thing in the past? Moreover, it was right in front of him. He was almost certain that the ball of light was definitely related to the divine weapon. Since that was the case, then he couldn't let it escape. "Where do you think you're going?" The great ancestor roared, letting go of Xiao Bai, and flew towards the ball of light. Whoosh! A sharp gust of wind blew, and the great ancestor's huge body pounced towards the ball of light. The ball of light was extremely sensitive and immediately reacted, understanding that it was in danger. The ball of light turned around and flew towards the deep pool. Xiao Bai's eyes widened and he shouted, "Don't run." The ball of light ran even faster, and in the blink of an eye, It was on the surface of the water, and in the next second, it would fall into the water. Once it entered the water, it wouldn't be so easy to deal with. Tang Jing knew this very well, so he instantly became one with the sword. His figure disappeared, becoming one with the hidden mysterious sword. The ball of light was fast, but the hidden mysterious sword was even faster. The moment the ball of light entered the water, the hidden mysterious sword finally caught up with it. Clang! Another heavy blow, and a huge whirlpool immediately appeared on the surface of the water, the whirlpool spinning counterclockwise. The ball of light, however, did not delay in the slightest. It swayed and fell into the water, its light dimming a little. Tang Zheng's figure reappeared, holding the dark concealment sword in his hand. He stood in the air, unwillingly looking at the ball of light disappearing into the water. The patriarch missed and looked at the water surface in disappointment. Tang Jing glared at him in annoyance. If he hadn't been so rash, he wouldn't have scared off the ball of light. The ball of light clearly had its own consciousness. This divine weapon could very well be a divine weapon. Only a divine weapon would have a weapon spirit and consciousness. The old ancestor felt uncomfortable under Tang Zheng's stare and resentfully turned his head to the side. When the others saw this, they couldn't defend the old ancestor. Because this was indeed his responsibility. What do we do now? The ancestor asked in embarrassment. Tang Jing took a deep breath and said, "It played hide and seek with me, but it found the wrong target. Since it wants to play underwater, then I'll play with it to the end." The ancestor's eyes lit up and he no longer doubted what he said. Tang Jing indeed had the strength to say such words. Xiao Bai finally took the opportunity to break free and shouted, "Master, I'll help you." The old ancestor's face suddenly changed. These words made his heart hang in suspense. He was afraid that if Tang Jing agreed, then Xiao Bai would be in a dangerous situation. Tang Jing could go into the water, but that didn't mean that Xiao Bai could too. It was indeed so. Tang Jing was very clear that he could come and go freely in the water, relying on his dragon body. Xiao Bai was good at controlling fire. After entering the water, it would not be good for him. If something happened to him, then it would be too late for him to regret. Thus he waved his hand and said, "You stay here and watch for me. Watch me go down and pull it out." When the ancestor heard this, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. He gasped for air. Immediately he felt that Tang Jing seemed to be more pleasing to the eye. Xiao Bai was helpless and looked at Tang Jing with pleading eyes. Tang Jing was indifferent. He looked deeply at Xiao Bai and rushed into the water without hesitation. The others' hearts were in suspense. They stretched their necks and looked at the deep pool. Tang Jing dived into the depths and immediately saw the ball of light not far away. The ball of light also noticed him and seemed to be very vigilant. It didn't immediately attack. The two sides were getting closer and closer. The ball of light seemed to have confirmed that it was Tang Jing. As soon as he entered the water, the ball of light immediately released a dazzling light and flew straight towards Tang Jing. Tang Jing shivered, understanding what this meant. He raised the hidden profound sword. The sword light was like a blazing sun attacking the ball of light. Clang, clang, clang. A series of collisions sounded incessantly. Pillars of water shot up into the sky from the water. The deep pool seemed to have turned into a fountain. Everyone was shocked by the pillars of water. Their expressions changed and even their breathing became hurried. The battle under the water was so intense. No one knew how the battle would turn out. Both sides had already exchanged dozens of blows, but they were actually evenly matched. Tang Jing was obviously at a disadvantage. He was unable to use the water avoidance pearl. His body was in close contact with the poisonous water. The poisonous water's effect on him was getting stronger and stronger. "I can't go on like this. Otherwise, I will die in the hands of the other party," he thought silently in his heart. In a hurry, he came up with a plan. With a shake of his body, a huge change happened to his body. He released a golden light that filled the bottom of the deep pool. A huge dragon's might spread from the bottom of the pool. Not long after, it completely surged out from the water. The old ancestor and the others had never seen a dragon before. Naturally, they had never felt the dragon's might. It was the first time in their lives that they felt the dragon's might. Everyone's heart seemed to stop. This dragon's might was far superior to Tang Zheng's aura. It gave people a feeling that they could not match up to it. The old ancestor's face was pale. He thought that it was released by the ball of light. He subconsciously thought that Tangjing was in danger. He swallowed his saliva and said with difficulty, "Your Majesty, I'm afraid he's in danger." Xiaobai rolled his eyes. How could he not understand the old ancestor's thoughts? He said disapprovingly, "You guessed wrong. This is Master's aura and not that ball of light." What? His aura? Why did he change so much in the blink of an eye? The old ancestor was so shocked that he almost doubted his life. He had never seen or heard of such a change. Xiaobai did not explain further. After all, the matter of the dragon race was a secret. If he could not disclose it to the public, then he would try his best not to. Tangjing had truly transformed into a dragon. His huge body almost occupied all the space at the bottom of the pool. He also blocked the escape route of the ball of light. At the same time, the water level of the deep pool rose by a large amount. After transforming, Tangjing clearly felt that his perception of water had become more sensitive. Moreover, the poison that originally posed a great threat to him had actually lost its effect. Yes, the dragon race had a natural affinity with water. Without the protection of the water avoidance pearl, the poisonous water would not be able to harm him. The pieces of glittering golden scales were like a set of armor, protecting him completely. Chapter 15:15. The ball of light also felt the terrifying dragon power, and seemed to understand the joy in the pair of huge dragon eyes, and realized that something was wrong. But the way out was completely blocked by the dragon body, and the ball of light had no way to escape. Ooh! There was a strange cry from the ball of light, as if there was a life calling. Hey, is it like the hidden mysterious sword and the spirit is calling? Tangjing pondered. The hidden mysterious sword seemed to feel the threat of the cry, and also made a sharp sword sound responding to the ball of light. The huge dragon claw gently stroked the hidden mysterious sword, and the sword sound became louder, as if it could not wait to compete with the ball of light. Good, then come. Tangjing raised his head and shouted. The hidden mysterious sword was connected to his mind, and naturally understood what he meant. It released a blazing light, and with an unparalleled momentum, it slashed downward. The ball of light immediately reacted, and the light that was much dimmer suddenly lit up, and was not inferior to the hidden mysterious sword at all. Whoosh! The two beams of light quickly collided with each other. At this moment the sun seemed to explode, and a dazzling light burst out from the bottom of the deep pool. Boom! There was an earth-shattering sound, and the earth trembled. The hard rocks around were like tofu cut into pieces and then quickly collapsed. The deep pool completely collapsed, and its appearance changed greatly. It expanded outward several times, and the small pool became a lake. The moment the pool collapsed, the others had already flown in all directions to avoid being contaminated by the poisonous water. The black water rippled, and the scene was very shocking. The waterfall that fell from the sky quickly replenished the water, and filled the small lake that had just formed. Everyone looked at the scene in shock and were deeply shocked. Their eyes were attracted to the lake at the same time, and there were rays of light coming from below, breaking through the water and one after another, cutting open the water surface, and a huge whirlpool appeared on the lake. Xiaobai had sharp eyes and pointed to the whirlpool and shouted, "Swish! Swish! Swish!" Everyone looked at the whirlpool, and in an instant, they opened their eyes wide and saw an unusual scene. A change occurred in the center of the whirlpool. A ball of clear water bubbled up like a spring. What's going on? The ancestor had lived by the waterfall for 10,000 years, but he had never seen such a scene. It was really an eye-opener. Xiaobai chuckled. Of course it's a good thing. After all, Qingshui is better than Blackwater. The clear spring water seemed to have a magical power. It rapidly expanded outwards, diluting the rest of the black water. The black color faded, and finally it became transparent. Does this mean there's no poison? Xiaobai pointed at the clear water and asked. The ancestor nodded subconsciously because the clear water was no different from ordinary drinking water. They witnessed the purification of the poisonous water with their own eyes. It was not like the sudden change when the waterfall parted, but a gradual change. There was a big difference between the two, as if it meant something. This mysterious feeling lingered in everyone's hearts, but there was no way to verify it. No one dared to throw themselves into the clear water and test it out. Moreover, the situation under the water was unknown, and no one was in the mood to test the water. They stretched out their necks, trying to see the situation under the water. They only saw balls of light flickering, two forces intersecting with each other, fighting back and forth. It was incomparably intense. Under the water, the ball of light became weaker and weaker. They could vaguely see the true appearance of the ball of light. After this bitter battle, Tang Jing could already confirm that the ball of light was a divine weapon. As for the true appearance of the divine weapon, he could not guess for the time being. Boom! With a loud sound, the hidden profound sword once again slashed on the ball of light. The ball of light trembled violently a few times and the light became weaker. The pair of huge dragon eyes suddenly shrank and grinned. "Oh, let's see how long you can last." Swish, swish. In fact, Tang Jing was very clear that the hidden profound sword was because of his support, so its power increased greatly. But this ball of light was relying on its own consciousness to fight. Comparing the two, the difference was obvious. The hidden profound sword obviously had the upper hand, which was why it was gradually suppressing the ball of light. Tang Jing was secretly delighted and once again waved the hidden profound sword. Just at this time, the ball of light was completely extinguished like a light bulb. The key was pressed. The bottom of the water dimmed a lot. Tang Jing subconsciously stopped. The hidden profound sword was raised high, but did not descend. He curiously stared at the ball of light that had completely dimmed. No, it was no longer light but a black ball of light. Shaking his dragon tail, he leaned forward, trying to see the opponent's true appearance. Boom! Just at this time, as if lightning flashed and thunder roared, the black ball of light burst out with a never-before-seen dazzling light, almost making people forget the concept of time. Tang Jing only felt pain on his body. Puff! A piece of scale armor was cut off and fresh blood gushed out, dyeing the surrounding water red. The surrounding water did not become clear like the surface of the water. Instead, it was still as black as ink, stained with blood. The ink was mixed with traces of bright red, which was especially dazzling. Tang Jing subconsciously sucked in a breath of cold air. His dragon eyes were wide open like two lanterns hanging high up in the air. A dazzling golden light shot out from his pupils, shining towards the bottom of the water. A wave of dizziness stimulated his brain and his heart trembled. He understood that this was the effect of the poison in the water. This time the poison was clearly even stronger, as if it had condensed all the poison in the pool and entered his body through the wound. One had to know that Tang Jing had originally cultivated the primal chaos Vajra spell and had an indestructible body. Furthermore, because he had transformed into a dragon, his entire body was covered in scales, making him even more impregnable and almost impossible to harm. However, there were always exceptions to everything and there was no way to be absolutely safe. The ball of light continued to release all of its power, exploding with the most powerful attack. Then Tang Jing was in a miserable state. He was actually injured and his blood flowed out, causing the poison to enter his body. "Since you're so cunning and want my life, then don't even think about having an easy time." Tang Jing slashed at the ball of light with his sword, causing it to dim once again. The ball of light seemed to have suffered quite a bit of impact and quickly sank to the bottom of the water. Tang Jing's blood was aroused and he did not give up. With a shake of his dragon tail, he chased after him. With a sweep of his dragon claws, he firmly controlled the ball of light. A certain amount of weak light was simply unable to cover its body, and the blood on the dragon's body flowed along the dragon claws to the ball of light. Chapter 15-16. The blood and light merged together, and the struggling of the ball of light immediately ceased. Unknowingly, Tang Jing heard a voice. "Let go of me." Tang Jing's anger subsided a lot. The voice was so clear and different from before. He guessed that something must have happened to the light. "Ah, your blood," the voice sounded again, sounding very panicked. The blood had firmly wrapped around the light and the situation was under control. Tang Jing was worried that there would be other changes, so he rushed into the sky. The moment before he rushed out of the water, he shook his body and returned to his human form. The matter of the dragon clan was confidential and he did not want outsiders to know. Flush. The water pillar soared into the sky and with the sound of breaking water, Tang Jing soared into the air. Everyone uniformly looked at him, staring at the ball of light in his hand that gradually lost its light, revealing its true appearance. Scepter. The great ancestor screamed in shock. His eyes almost popped out as he stared at Tang Jing's hand. Tang Jing looked down and was stunned. A scepter was quietly placed in his hand. The scepter was about half a meter long and it was crystal clear and fiery red. A few simple straight lines ran through the head and tail of the scepter, showing a kind of beauty that was simple to the extreme. Sacred inscriptions. Tang Jing's eyes lit up. He recognized them at a glance. They were the sacred inscriptions he was familiar with. It also has 3 sacred inscriptions. He stared at the 3 straight lines, comparing them with the sacred inscriptions of his hidden sword. It was hard to tell which one was better. Suddenly he understood that this sacred weapon was not inferior to the hidden sword. No wonder it was so difficult to deal with. The hidden sword had merged with 2 sacred weapons to become what it was today. Could be imagined how powerful the scepter was. Traces of blood flowed around the scepter, showing signs of seeping into it. Tang Jing moved his head. This was very similar to the situation of dripping blood to recognize its owner. However, dripping blood to recognize its owner required a corresponding chant. Moreover, the dripping blood had to be the heart's blood and not ordinary blood. However, Tang Jing's blood also contained a lot of energy. Therefore, when the blood flowed around the scepter, this happened. That's not right. Dripping blood to recognize its owner is a complicated process. Can't be done by just relying on the magic weapon itself. Why would this scepter have such a big reaction? Tang Jing soon found an unusual clue. Whoosh. After the blood flowed a few rounds, it suddenly flashed and disappeared into the scepter. Bloodthirsty scepter. The great ancestor shouted, his eyes were full of disbelief. His breathing became rapid and his chest rose and fell as he stared at the scepter. As if it had heard those words, the scepter also buzzed and trembled, showing signs of breaking free from Tang Jing's control. Tang Jing's head trembled. He understood that he had completely misjudged the situation. After the scepter came into contact with his blood, it was not controlled. Instead, it deliberately stopped and waited for an opportunity to absorb his blood. After all, Tang Jing was so powerful. His blood was also extraordinary. It was not easy to absorb his blood. Therefore, the scepter deliberately showed weakness to lower Tang Jing's guard. Then it took the opportunity to absorb his blood. Once it absorbed the blood, its aura completely changed. The exhaustion from the bitter battle was completely made up, and it emitted a bewitching red light. Stop it quickly. Don't let it escape. The great ancestor shouted anxiously. He seemed to be very afraid of the scepter. Tang Jing felt the scepter trembling more and more violently, as if it was going to break free from his hand. He hurriedly used his power to suppress it. Seeing this, Xiaobai could not bear to let Tang Jing face such a huge threat alone. Without hesitation he leaped and flew in front of Tang Jing. Master, let me help you. Tang Jing looked at Xiaobai and his heart moved. This scepter was an item from the sky. Back then the imperial family had racked their brains to get it. Even so, the imperial family had paid a painful price for it. Xiaobai was a descendant of the imperial family. If he helped the imperial family fulfill their last wish, it would be a blessing. Moreover, the power of the scepter was limitless and it was an ownerless item. Since Tang Jing already possessed the hidden profound sword, he naturally would not covet this magical treasure. He might as well give it to Little White, allowing him to be like a tiger that had grown wings. It would bring him great benefits in the future. Xiaobai, drip your blood on it and subdue it. Tang Jing hurriedly said. Xiaobai was stunned. He did not expect Tang Jing to be so generous. He said excitedly, Master, it's yours to subdue. Don't dawdle. It's struggling more and more. If we let it escape, it will be difficult to catch it. Tang Jing urged. Xiaobai knew that Tang Jing was a man of his word. Since he said so, he could only do as he was told. However, the gratitude in his heart was beyond words. He knew very well how precious this scepter was and how significant it was to the imperial family and to him. Hearing this, the others were stunned, especially the ancestor. He was very clear about the extraordinary meaning of the scepter. Moreover, he knew how powerful the scepter was. Tang Jing did not covet the scepter. Instead, he did not hesitate to let Xiaobai drip his blood on it. This kind of spirit made him feel ashamed of his inferiority. He used to think that Tang Jing was a treacherous villain who deceived Xiaobai. He also wanted to expose his disguise. However, this was a real benefit and Tang Jing was willing to give it up. This could not be faked at all. If he did not sincerely treat Little White well, How could he be willing to give up such a huge benefit? Suddenly he looked at Tang Jing with a more complicated gaze. There was a trace of admiration in it. The fog and the others did not know the true use and value of the scepter. However, after experiencing the twists and turns, they knew that the scepter was not ordinary. Seeing that His Majesty had a chance to subdue the scepter, their hearts beat fast. Their eyes were burning as they watched the scene unfold. Xiao Bai had already started to drip his blood on the scepter. A drop of blood flew out from his heart. Under the guidance of his fingertip, it flew directly to the scepter. At this moment the great ancestor seemed to have been struck by lightning. A memory from the deepest part of his mind flashed through his mind, and deep fear surged in his eyes as he shouted, "Your Majesty, quickly stop." The others looked at the great ancestor who had such an abnormal attitude. They did not understand why he wanted to stop such a good thing. Xiao Bai heard the great ancestor, but he did not care. Since his master asked him to drip his blood on the scepter, he would definitely carry out his master's order. On the other hand, Tang Jing frowned. He did not understand the great ancestor's intention. However, the arrow was already on the bow, so he had to do it. Poof! The blood dripped onto the scepter. The red light on the scepter suddenly converged. Then, like an atomic bomb, it expanded outward with a bang. Only the color of blood was left between heaven and earth. Chapter 15-17. Heaven and earth were completely dyed red by this overwhelming blood-red color. Bathed in it, everyone's eyes were red. Even their pupils were dyed red. Tang Jing was apprehensive. He hadn't expected such a huge reaction. He subconsciously recalled how the great ancestor had stopped him a moment ago. Could it be that there was some danger in dripping blood to claim ownership? Xiao Bai didn't pay much attention to this. He only remembered to drip blood to claim ownership. After his heart's blood fused with the bloodthirsty scepter, he blurted out the incantation, and a mysterious connection was established between him and the scepter. His body was also dyed red, and a ball of flame rose from his body. It burned fiercely, turning him into a man of fire. Everyone was silent as they stared at him. They knew there was no turning back. They could only wait quietly for the result. The bloodthirsty scepter flew up and shone with a blood-red radiance. It flew into the flames and landed in Tang Jing's hand. When the bloodthirsty scepter landed in his hand, a ball of blazing red light soared into the sky and merged with the flames. In an instant, the flames seemed to have become even more powerful. Tang Jing couldn't take his eyes off the scepter. Suddenly he felt a chill in his heart as a strange energy emerged spontaneously from every corner of his body. This is that lethal poison. He was shocked. When the lethal poison entered his body, he was wholeheartedly focused on the bloodthirsty scepter. He even swore to fight to the death with the scepter. He didn't pay much attention to the lethal poison and even seemed to have gotten used to it. He didn't expect the poison to show its effects now that things had calmed down. He sucked in a breath of cold air and immediately circulated his energy to resist the poison. However, the poison had unknowingly entered every part of his body. "Oh no!" he suddenly shouted. His attention was focused on Yuanying's body. The lethal poison had also infected Yuanying. The nascent soul was even more fragile than him, and it immediately reacted strongly. It struggled to stand up in pain, and he immediately experienced this kind of pain. His body felt like it was being torn apart as tens of thousands of steel needles pierced his body. The feeling was worse than death. He had never cried out in pain before. No matter how serious his injuries were, he could endure it. However, this time there was no other way. This was inhumane torture. A heart-wrenching scream rang out, scaring everyone. Only then did everyone notice Tang Jing's abnormal state. His entire body was emitting waves of black gas. The grand ancestor turned pale with fright and shouted, "He's poisoned." Everyone suddenly realized that it must have been when they were underwater. What should they do? The old ancestor was also helpless. In the past there were others who had been poisoned by this poison, and they would definitely die. There was no medicine that could save them. Otherwise, the imperial family would not have been wiped out. This was the result of the poison being too powerful. Xiao Bai had already completed the blood-binding process. The flames and bloody light around his body had disappeared, and the bloodthirsty scepter was quietly held in his hand. When he saw Tang Jing's miserable state, he was so scared that his soul almost left his body. He hurriedly said, Master, I'm here to save you. Tang Zheng's remaining consciousness hurriedly stopped him and said, Xiaobai, don't come over. This poison is dangerous. Even he himself had been poisoned. If Xiaobai were to save him and both of them were poisoned, wouldn't that be a great loss? No, master, I must save you, Xiaobai said stubbornly. His eyes were bright red and he didn't care about his own life at all. When the Grand Ancestor and the others saw this, they were so scared that their souls almost left their bodies. They cried out, Your Majesty, don't. However, this time they couldn't stop Xiaobai at all. Xiaobai rushed in front of Tang Jing and was about to make a move without saying anything. Tang Jing understood Little White's temper and knew that even if he cried, it would be of no use. He suddenly had an idea, as he had been able to neutralize quite a bit of the poison over the years. Wasn't this also related to the bloodthirsty scepter? Could the bloodthirsty scepter be able to detoxify the poison? Since that was the case, there was hope for him to cure the poison. Xiaobai, don't be rash. The bloodthirsty scepter can cure the poison. Think of a way to cure me with the bloodthirsty scepter. I can still hold on, Tang Jing shouted. Xiaobai was startled. He immediately communicated with the bloodthirsty scepter's artifact spirit. You can cure the poison? Yes, master, the artifact spirit replied, no longer as unruly as before. Xiaobai was overjoyed. He secretly praised his master's intelligence. He had just seen the pond water being purified. How did he connect it to the bloodthirsty scepter? Then hurry up and save master, Xiaobai urged. Yes, master. The bloodthirsty scepter replied. A bloody light shot out from the scepter and landed on Tang Zheng's chest. Then the red light spread out like veins and covered Tang Zheng's entire body. Tang Zheng stared blankly at the changes happening to his body. When the bloody light hit him, the pain he felt decreased several times. When the bloody light reached his Yuanying, the Yuanying stopped struggling. It was as if the medicine had cured the disease. The pain had completely disappeared. All of these changes happened too quickly. His poison had completely disappeared, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Tang Jing looked left and right. He couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. All of these changes were too inconceivable. His gaze involuntarily fell on the bloodthirsty scepter. This peerless divine weapon was indeed a good item. It could even cure such a powerful poison in such a short time. Xiaobai looked at Tang Jing in pleasant surprise. He asked worriedly, Master, how are you? Tang Jing shook his head. Xiaobai, thank you. Xiaobai scratched his head and said embarrassedly, I didn't expect it to be so powerful. With that, he subconsciously stroked the bloodthirsty scepter with his finger. Streaks of bloody light swam around the scepter, rippling unsteadily. When the others saw this, they couldn't help but marvel at the bloodthirsty scepter's power. It was simply a holy item for curing poisons. If they had it back then, dealing with the traitor wouldn't have been so troublesome. They wouldn't have failed back then either. However, the old ancestor's brows were still locked in a frown, as if he was worried about something. His gaze wandered between Xiaobai and the bloodthirsty scepter. Xiaobai jumped for joy and boasted to the old ancestor. Ancestor, look, I've cured master. Ancestor, what's wrong? Aren't you happy for me? The patriarch's distressed expression attracted everyone's attention. Everyone looked at him in puzzlement. Only Tang Zheng's head twitched as he remembered that the patriarch had stopped Xiaobai from dripping his blood to recognize him as the patriarch's master. He asked worriedly, Patriarch, is there a problem with the bloodthirst scepter? The forefather's heart trembled as he inwardly praised Tang Zheng's cleverness. His impression of Tang Zheng had changed a lot, so he didn't have a cold expression on his face. Instead, he nodded worriedly and said, Yes, this bloodthirsty scepter is far more extraordinary than you can imagine. Recklessly dripping blood on it to recognize it as its master. I'm afraid, it's hard to say whether it's a blessing or a curse. The old ancestor wanted to say something but stopped. His attitude made everyone's heart hang high in the air. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1518. Hard to explain? Tang Jing said in a deep voice. Then I'm all ears. Xiaobai was also very interested in this matter. After all, the bloodthirsty scepter was his treasure. He was interested in everything related to the scepter. Ancestor, hurry up and tell us. Xiaobai urged. The ancestor looked at Xiaobai and nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. He paused for a moment to gather his thoughts before continuing. The bloodthirsty scepter is an ancient treasure from the realm beyond heaven. Moreover, this treasure is closely related to the royal family. The scepter symbolizes power. Since ancient times, it has always been the symbol of the royal family. However, many years ago, a tyrant appeared in the royal family. He was addicted to killing. The scepter was stained with the blood of countless people and became the bloodthirsty scepter. It went from being a divine weapon that symbolized power and the royal family to being an ominous item. Everyone was attracted to the bloodthirsty scepter. They didn't expect there to be so many unknown stories about it. Although Xiaobai had inherited the royal family's memories, he didn't have any memories of the bloodthirsty scepter. From this, it could be seen that not everyone in the royal family knew about the bloodthirsty scepter. The ancestor was well-read. He had a deep understanding of the history and origins of the realm beyond heaven and the royal family. That was why he knew about this matter. Later on, perhaps because the tyrant had killed too many people, he didn't live for long. After the new emperor ascended the throne, he sealed the bloodthirsty scepter. From then on, the bloodthirsty scepter's whereabouts became a mystery. The new emperor worked hard to bring peace to the world. He changed the face of the royal family, and the royal family prospered again. After the death of the new emperor, the bloodthirsty scepter truly disappeared. No one knew where it went. Although the bloodthirsty scepter was an ominous item, it was still a divine weapon. There was no need to doubt its power. Moreover, that tyrant's pursuit of power had reached a crazy level. He refined the bloodthirsty scepter many times, increasing its power again and again. No matter who obtained the bloodthirsty scepter, they would be able to stir up the world. The ancestor sighed. I wonder if that traitor really knew that the bloodthirsty scepter was here or if it was just a coincidence. No. Tang Jing shook his head. From your words, I can conclude that the traitor must be a man who is obsessed with power. If he knew that the bloodthirsty scepter was here, he would have found it no matter what. How could he miss such a great opportunity? The ancestor's eyes lit up and he couldn't help but look at Tang Jing a few more times. He thought to himself that this kid's mind was really meticulous and he actually guessed it so accurately. This was also the old ancestor's judgment. All of this was probably just a coincidence. If the late emperor knew that the bloodthirst scepter was buried here, he probably wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to search for the treasure. Although the bloodthirsty scepter could be of great help, it was also very dangerous. The late emperor would not take such a huge risk to let the bloodthirsty scepter see the light of day again. You said that the bloodthirsty scepter is an ominous item. What ominous sign does it have? Tang Jing felt that this was the key to the problem. Since what was done couldn't be undone, it was best to understand what kind of danger the bloodthirsty scepter would cause. It was better to take precautions before it happened. The ancestor's gaze fell upon the bloodthirsty scepter, and he couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. The bloodthirsty scepter will devour its owner and turn him into a ruthless person. In fact, he might even become a tyrant. He looked at Xiaobai with worry. Xiaobai felt a chill in his heart. He embarrassedly said, "Ancestor, don't look at me like that. I'm not a tyrant." "Your Majesty, you're not a tyrant now, but if you come into contact with the bloodthirsty scepter for too long, you'll be infected by its ferocity. Then you'll become a tyrant as well." This was what the ancestor was most worried about. He didn't want another tyrant to appear in the royal family. A tyrant wouldn't be able to unite the people's hearts, and he wouldn't be able to take back sky beyond sky from the hands of the traitor's descendant and restore the royal family's former glory. Seeing that the ancestor didn't believe him, Xiaobai raised his hand and swore, "I, Xiaobai, swear today that if I become a tyrant in the future, no, a ruthless person, then I won't need anyone to deal with me. I'll end my own life first. Everyone here can bear witness to this." Xiaobai made a solemn vow, but it couldn't dispel the ancestor's deep worry. Tang Jing pondered for a long time, then said, "A treasure is a treasure after all. Xiaobai is its owner. If the owner can't control the treasure, then is he still the owner? Also, I believe that Xiaobai won't be affected by the bloodthirsty scepter and become a tyrant. Also, with me here, I won't let this happen." The ancestor glanced at him and didn't say a word. It was obvious that he didn't believe his words. Tang Jing didn't care. He didn't care whether the ancestor believed him or not. He would keep his promise. The most important thing was that he believed in Xiaobai. With the two of them working together, he didn't believe that they wouldn't be able to deal with the bloodthirsty scepter. Xiaobai looked gratefully at Tang Jing and said with a smile, "Master still understands me the best." Tang Jing squeezed out a faint smile and said, "Ancestor, since the bloodthirsty scepter is so dangerous, why can it also cure poisons? This is the other use of the bloodthirsty scepter." Back then that tyrant was also a poison expert, but he wasn't limited to that. He also knew how to cure poisons. Moreover, he added a powerful function to the bloodthirsty scepter, and that's detoxification. The bloodthirsty scepter can cure almost all poisons. The ancestor sighed, seemingly amazed by the tyrant's generosity back then. Cure all poisons? Tang Jing sucked in a breath of cold air. This was too powerful. It sounded like bragging, but the truth was right in front of him. He couldn't doubt it at all. With such a divine weapon, he wouldn't have to worry about being poisoned in the future. If the imperial family back then had the bloodthirsty scepter, they wouldn't have to fear the poison of the traitor. History would also be rewritten. In that case, the bloodthirsty scepter isn't completely useless. At least it can cure poisons. In the future, when we meet that traitor's descendant, we won't have to worry about being poisoned again. Tang Jing said excitedly, as if he had discovered a new continent. The ancestor didn't deny this point, but his heavy tone didn't change as he muttered to himself. In the past, I couldn't understand why most of our strength was deteriorating. Now that the bloodthirsty scepter has appeared, I finally understand. It's true that the bloodthirsty scepter can cure poisons and remove most of the Suicide Valley's poison, but it also affects us, causing our strength to deteriorate bit by bit. This is the benefit it brings to us and the harm it brings to us. So it's like that. The ancestor's words made everyone come to a realization. They all looked at the bloodthirsty scepter in Xiaobai's hands with fear, feeling its ferocious nature even more. They didn't even come into direct contact with the bloodthirsty scepter, but they were all affected. It should be because you drank the water from this waterfall that you were affected quite a bit. Tang Jing pointed at the waterfall and said. It was true that the bloodthirsty scepter was ferocious, but in the end, if the two sides didn't come into direct contact, it would be difficult to affect them. And water was the only medium, which was why this kind of situation occurred. Chapter 15:19. Water. Everyone felt as if they had been hit in the head and immediately understood. The ancestor exclaimed, "I know most of us have always been in the Suicide Valley and have never left. Only the fog and the night are able to easily hide their whereabouts because of their special cultivation techniques. So every time they go out to scout for information, it's always the two of them. The two of them drank the least amount of water from the waterfall, so naturally they were the least affected." Everyone secretly nodded. This was the answer. Turned out to be so simple. They originally thought that there was no problem with the purified water. They didn't expect that even though there was no poison, there was still the influence of the bloodthirsty scepter, causing them to be caught off guard. Everyone looked at each other. "I'm a little scared." If they hadn't found out about this problem, then they would have been affected in the future and wouldn't have been able to find out the reason. The fog and the night looked at each other in dismay. They had gone to scout for information and had actually avoided being accidentally injured. It was truly inconceivable. The ancestor glared fiercely at the waterfall and said, "Then we won't be able to drink this water in the future." Unexpectedly, Tang Jing shook his head and said, "No. The bloodthirsty scepter has already been taken out, so it won't be affected. As for the remaining poison, Xiaobai, after you use the bloodthirsty scepter to detoxify it, everything will be solved." "Alright, I'll start now." Xiaobai did as he said. The bloodthirsty scepter pointed at the waterfall. A red light shot towards the source of the waterfall, and the water immediately became incomparably clear. Not long after, all the water became clear without the slightest bit of poison. This change was so fast that it was too much for the eye to take in. Xiaobai couldn't help but stroke the bloodthirsty scepter. This was truly a good thing it worked so quickly. From now on, the Suicide Valley would no longer be the Suicide Valley. In fact, even the poison in the outermost area could be completely neutralized in a very short period of time. But why is it that the poison in other places has been neutralized, but this pool and the bloodthirsty scepter are in close contact, yet the poison has not been neutralized? Tang Jing looked at the waterfall, deep in thought. "Have you been to the top of the waterfall?" Tang Jing pointed at the source of the waterfall and asked. The source of the waterfall was too high. It was as if it had fallen from the sky and the top was still hidden in the clouds. This was because one couldn't fly in this place. Even after so many years, the great ancestor and the others had never been to the source. After hearing Tang Zheng's question, the ancestor revealed a resentful expression and said, "We can't go up at all. Even if we can't fly up, we still have to climb up." Xiaobai knew what Tang Zheng was thinking. He also wanted to go up and investigate, so he said resolutely. Tang Zheng nodded his head in relief. Xiaobai was never intimidated by difficulties, which was a commendable trait. The patriarch continued to persuade, "This cliff is so high, it's really too dangerous. Your Majesty, why don't we send people up to explore the way first?" Xiaobai said without any trace of politeness, "If you could go up, then you would have gone up long ago. Why wait until now?" The great ancestor's face turned the color of pig liver, but he didn't say anything. Xiaobai realized that his words were too harsh, so he said kindly, "Great ancestor, don't worry, we're not 3-year-old children. How could we really fall to our deaths?" But the great ancestor wanted to persuade again, but he was interrupted by Xiaobai with a wave of his hand. His Majesty had His Majesty. If one of them opposed, then it would damage His Majesty and lose his duty as a subject. "Xiaobai, let's go." Tang Jing jumped up high and directly climbed the cliff beside the waterfall. The cliff was very wet and slippery, but Tang Zheng's fingers directly grabbed into the rock, so he wasn't worried about falling. Xiaobai did the same and they quickly climbed to the source of the waterfall. When the others saw this scene, they were so scared that their hearts were in their throats and they all looked at them. The great ancestor was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan, but there was nothing he could do. The two of them climbed higher and higher, and from the ground they looked like two small black dots climbing up bit by bit. Whoosh whoosh. The biting cold wind blew mixed with the rain, slapping his cheeks with a pa-pa-pa sound. "Xiaobai, if you're tired, let's rest for a while," Tang Jing suggested. They were all peerless experts, but climbing this waterfall actually made them feel powerless. Their strength was exhausted very quickly, and it was a world of difference from normal. Tang Jing realized that there was definitely something extraordinary up there, which was why there was such a big impact. It was no wonder that the great ancestor would say something to stop them. It was obvious that he had experienced this before. However, Tang Jing and Xiaobai were people who wouldn't give up until they reached the Yellow River, so they definitely wouldn't give up. They climbed up a bit more, but it felt like there was no end to it. It was as if there was a shackle on their bodies and they were getting heavier and heavier. Moreover, their fingers were grabbing into the rock deeper and deeper. If they waited until their fingers couldn't grab into the rock, then it would really be dangerous. Tang Jing subconsciously looked down and almost couldn't see the people on the ground. He only saw a waterfall flowing down, and it was a spectacular sight. There was no turning back. It was more dangerous going down than going up, and there was absolutely no way to go back the way they came. "Xiaobai, how are you?" Xiaobai shook his head and said, "Master, I can hold on." Tang Jing stared at Xiaobai's eyes and knew that it was impossible to ask him to go down at this time. Thus, the two of them didn't say anything else and continued to climb up. Gradually, their fingers could grab into the rock less and less. In the end, they could only rely on their fingers to grab onto the protrusions of the rock, and there was no way to grab it at all. Their skills seemed to have been greatly reduced. In addition, the hardness of the rock had greatly increased, which led to this situation. Xiaobai's breathing became hurried. Suddenly, his hand didn't hold firmly and his fingers slipped and his body fell down. "Ah!" Xiaobai subconsciously cried out in alarm. Tang Jing's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast, and he grabbed onto Xiaobai. He only used one hand to grab onto a protrusion of the rock. "Xiaobai, I've caught you. I'll pull you up," Tang Jing anxiously said. Xiaobai gasped for breath and said, "Master, quickly let go. If you do, you'll fall down with me." At this moment they were not much different from ordinary people. They couldn't fly, and even their skills were suppressed by a mysterious power. The two of them knew that they had encountered an unprecedented danger and test. The more dangerous it was, the more they had to grit their teeth and persevere. If they took a step back, then perhaps they would fall into a bottomless abyss. They absolutely could not compromise. "Xiaobai, I must pull you up," Tang Jing persisted. Xiaobai shook his head. "No, master, it doesn't matter if I die, but you can't die." "Don't be silly, I won't allow you to die. Without my permission you must live well for me. We still have to help you take back Sky Beyond Sky," Tang Jing said excitedly. Xiaobai's eyes were filled with tears and he kept shaking his head. No, master, in the next life you will continue to be my master. Xiaobai used all his strength to pry open Tang Zheng's fingers. He was like a kite with a broken string quickly falling down. Xiaobai. Chapter 15:20. Tang Zheng jumped off the cliff without any hesitation. To him, Xiaobai was like a family member. He would definitely not watch him die. The wind was bitterly cold, causing people's cheeks to hurt. Xiaobai and Tang Zheng both knew how to fly. However, at the top of the cliff, even this ability to fly was suppressed. Otherwise, why would they go through so much trouble? On the ground, when everyone saw this scene, they were scared out of their wits. The elder ancestor could not help but shout, "Your Majesty." However, when they saw the scene of Tang Zheng jumping down together, they were all deeply shocked. A person could risk his life to save others. How selfless was this? The elder ancestor could not help but understand Xiaobai. He could die for Tang Zheng without hesitation, and Tang Zheng could also die for him. This kind of relationship was too precious. However, they did not have time to think about the relationship between the two. What they should do now was the most important thing. Hurry and save them. The elder ancestor roared. His body quickly grew like a spring bed trying to catch them. As Xiaobai fell, he looked at Tang Zheng and shook his head with tears in his eyes. "Master, why do you have to do this? For me, it is not worth sacrificing your life." Tang Zheng stared at him with a burning gaze. He grabbed Xiaobai's hand and said, "You are my family. How can I watch you die?" "Master, meeting you is Xiaobai's fortune." Whoosh. Suddenly, a white cloud appeared without warning. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. He shouted, "Somersault cloud." Whoosh. The somersault cloud immediately flew to their feet. Bang. The two landed on the soft somersault cloud, not suffering any injuries. Wow. Waves of exclamations sounded from the ground. They did not expect that there would be a cloud to catch the two. Wild Dog remembered this cloud. Back in the wildlands, Tang Zheng and Xiaobai rode on a cloud. At the same time, they were amazed in their hearts. What was the origin of this cloud? It could actually fly freely. Tang Zheng secretly regretted that he had forgotten about the somersault cloud. The somersault cloud was not an ordinary Dharma treasure. In the space of the Langya Pavilion, the somersault cloud could fly freely. Although this suicide valley was very strange, the somersault cloud might be able to fly. Blinded by a single leaf, Tang Zheng made a common mistake. Fortunately, the somersault cloud had automatically saved them at the critical moment, saving them from the danger of being smashed to pieces. Xiaobai jumped up excitedly and cheered, "Master, we are fine now, all thanks to the somersault cloud." Tang Zheng nodded happily. "Yes, somersault cloud. Thank you." The somersault cloud shook a few times as if it was enjoying their praise. With the somersault cloud, this cliff is no longer unreachable. Tang Zheng was in high spirits. He pointed at the source of the waterfall and commanded, "Somersault cloud, go there." Whoosh. With a piercing sound, the somersault cloud soared into the sky and flew to the source of the waterfall in the blink of an eye. The bright sunlight was dazzling and instantly covered their bodies. The world at the source of the waterfall was bathed in the sunlight, blooming with a dazzling brilliance. Tang Zheng and Xiaobai widened their eyes and admired the source of the waterfall. The two looked at each other and widened their eyes at the same time. How could this be?" Xiaobai exclaimed. Tang Zheng's shock could be imagined. What kind of place was this? In the past, in their impression, since this was the source of the waterfall and the waterfall had always been highly toxic, this place must be a desolate place. However, what they saw was not like this at all. This was actually a paradise. Here, flowers were blooming, fruits were abundant, vegetation was lush, and the air was unbelievably fresh. It was like a fairyland. Xiaobai jumped off the somersault cloud and looked around, unable to hide his excitement. "Master, this place is much better than below. Moreover, the spirit energy here is very dense. It can allow one's cultivation to increase quickly." Xiaobai said excitedly. Tang Zheng did not comment and said, "Let's check this place first." This place was like a small mountain. Although the area was not small, they did not spend too much time checking it. The source of the endless waterfall was a spring. Water continuously flowed out of the spring and then flowed down 3,000 feet into the deep pool. The spring water was extremely clear and the poison had been neutralized. Xiaobai pointed to the spring and said, "This waterfall is the source of the poison." After so many years, it has not been neutralized. I guess that the traitor must have poisoned it here. The poisonous water fell from the sky and flowed through every piece of land below, causing this suicide valley to be completely contaminated by the poison. Once my ancestors entered this land without the antidote, they would immediately be harmed by the poison. Tang Jing nodded his head slightly, admitting that Xiao Bai's analysis was very reasonable. However, he still had a lot of questions in his heart. For example, this was the source of the poison, so why was it flourishing? This did not make sense at all. Xiao Bai also thought of this point. He looked around with a strange expression, shook his head bitterly and sighed, "Strange, truly strange. We checked it just now but we didn't find any clues at all." Tang Jing said doubtfully. Xiao Bai said, "That's right, the vegetation is lush and there isn't even a bare rock." "Oh no, other than this stubborn rock here there isn't even a rock anywhere else." Tang Jing subconsciously looked in the direction of Xiao Bai's finger. There was a rock standing at the mouth of the spring. This rock was about the height of a person and was very inconspicuous. It was no different from an ordinary rock. Huh. Tang Jing looked at it a few more times, reached out his hand and touched it a few times and could not help but exclaim, "This seems to be a heaven and earth profound stone." Heaven and earth profound stone? Xiao Bai also exclaimed. Xiao Bai was no stranger to heaven and earth profound stone. He quickly touched it a few times and sure enough, this was really a heaven and earth profound stone. Back then we searched for so long and only managed to gather 99 pieces of heaven and earth profound stone. I never thought that there would actually be a piece of heaven and earth profound stone here. Could it be that the heaven and earth profound stone came from the sky? Tang Jing said curiously. No, at least in my memory there is no heaven and earth profound stone. Xiao Bai immediately retorted, "Perhaps when the elder ancestor comes up later we can ask him. The heaven and earth profound stone is very useful to us. Moreover, the heaven and earth profound stone is related to the stairway to heaven. If other people use it to build the stairway to heaven, then wouldn't it completely connect the two worlds? This is temporarily not beneficial to us. Master, you want to keep this heaven and earth profound stone to prevent it from falling into the hands of others." Xiao Bai understood Tang Jing's thoughts. Tang Jing smiled, reached out his hand and touched the stubborn rock. His wrist lit up. This was the Sumer heavens taking effect, trying to keep it. However, the stubborn rock did not move at all. The light of the Sumer heavens completely enveloped it, but it was completely useless. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1521. This miraculous scene completely stunned Tang Jing and Little White. They stared at each other with their eyes wide open as they did not expect such an outcome. Xiao Bai exclaimed, "Master, why don't I pick it up first?" He hugged the stone without any explanation and grimaced. He seemed to have used all his strength but it did not move at all. This stone seemed to be connected to the earth and could not be moved at all. Xiao Bai dejectedly circled the stone twice and clicked his tongue in wonder. "Strange, strange, this stone does not look big but I can't pick it up." Tang Jing's eyes were like lightning. Suddenly he took out the hidden profound sword and slashed at the stone. Sparks flew everywhere but the stone was not damaged at all. He sucked in a breath of cold air. A peerless divine weapon like the hidden profound sword could not even leave a mark on the stone. Xiao Bai was also shocked and said, "Master, how can this be? This heaven and earth ore is not ordinary. It is quite different from the heaven and earth ore we have seen before." Tang Jing pondered for a long time and said. Xiao Bai nodded in agreement. "Then what should we do?" "Don't worry about it for now. It is a stone after all, a dead object. It is not related to the big picture." Tang Jing had no choice but to give up. Little White unwillingly looked at the mischievous rock a few times, but could only resentfully give up. Looking around, it changed the topic and said, "There are flowers and fruits here. It's simply a mountain of flowers and fruits." Tang Jing laughed involuntarily. "Then why don't we call it Mountain of Flowers and Fruits?" Mountain of Flowers and Fruits, a good name. Xiao Bai's eyes lit up. Suicide Valley, this name is too unpleasant to hear. From now on this place will be called Mountain of Flowers and Fruits. The two stepped on the somersault cloud and flew back to the waterfall. Everyone hurriedly greeted them and looked at them in the somersault cloud in surprise. The two briefly explained what they saw at the source of the waterfall. Everyone was amazed and wanted to go up and investigate. But they could not go up by themselves, so they looked at Tangjing and the somersault cloud. Especially the somersault cloud, which had given them a huge shock. Their transcendent artifacts were unable to fly in the air, but this white cloud could fly without any hindrance. It completely outclassed their transcendent artifacts, and they couldn't help but be convinced. Somersault cloud change. Tangjing smiled faintly and shouted. The somersault cloud expanded rapidly and occupied more than half of the area below the waterfall. Come on up. Everyone looked at each other. Then they boarded the somersault cloud with excitement and caution. The somersault cloud whizzed past and flew directly to Huagua Mountain. When everyone stepped foot on this piece of land, they looked left and right in amazement. A moment later, everyone returned to the mischievous rock. All of them clicked their tongues in wonder. The place where they had lived for so many years actually had such a place. It was truly unexpected. I don't think there's anything special about it. Mist pouted and said with disappointment. The old ancestor's eyes were deep as he swept his gaze around and said, Fog, you're wrong. This place is even more mysterious than below. Don't you realize that after coming here your powers are greatly restricted? After the old ancestor's reminder, everyone also noticed some clues. When they were under the waterfall, although they couldn't fly in the air, their powers weren't restricted. The battle was still very smooth. But at this moment they had actually become like ordinary people. They couldn't even circulate their powers normally. This is too strange. Wild Dog smacked his lips and exclaimed. The world was big and there were all kinds of strange things. This time they had really broadened their horizons. The scenery above is good and the spiritual energy is abundant. Why don't you live here? It's better than the darkness below. Xiaobai suggested. The old ancestor said with a troubled expression, Your Majesty, although this suggestion is good, it is not realistic. We can't fly in the air, so it's very difficult to go up and down. Therefore it's more convenient to live under the waterfall. Xiaobai patted his head and said resentfully, That's right, I almost forgot the most important point. However, to be able to come here in my lifetime, it can be considered as fulfilling a wish. The old ancestor said with relief. This place will be called Mountain of Flowers and Fruit from now on, and this Suicide Valley will also be changed to Mountain of Flowers and Fruit. The name Suicide Valley sounds too strange. Xiaobai said with certainty. The others naturally had no objections. There was nothing else on the mountain, so everyone naturally returned to the bottom of the waterfall. Now that the divine armament Bloodthirsty Scepter had become Xiaobai's magic treasure, the poison on this land could be dispelled at any time, so they could leave this land at any time. However, the old ancestor did not leave because the outside world was too dangerous. Moreover, they were not prepared to fight against the traitor forces. Xiaobai was very clear about this point. Although the old ancestor insisted on letting Xiaobai lead everyone to fight against the traitor forces, Xiaobai refused without hesitation. He did not want his people to die in vain. Only by knowing yourself and knowing your enemy can you win 100 battles. He still wanted to go to the enemy's territory to find out more before making a decision. The old ancestor was very gratified by Xiaobai's calm way of doing things, but he was also very ashamed. After all, after so many years, His Majesty had returned and he was not ready. Xiaobai comforted him for a long time before dispelling the old ancestor's thoughts. Time was of the essence. Tangjing had been away from the human world for too long. In order to avoid a fire in his backyard, he had to return to the human world as soon as possible. The old ancestor couldn't persuade Xiaobai, so he compromised and said, Your Majesty, if no one serves you with your identity, wouldn't we not be fulfilling our duties? Therefore let the fog follow you. She has been outside a few times and with her around, it should be more convenient for her to do things. This. Xiaobai didn't know how to refuse, so he turned to look at Tangjing. Tangjing thoughtfully looked at the fog and nodded his head without leaving a trace. With the fog as a guide, they might be able to avoid some trouble. Xiaobai reluctantly said, All right then. Only then did the old ancestor heave a sigh of relief. If he really let Xiaobai and the others leave alone, he would probably continue to blame himself. You guys stay here and don't go outside for the time being. Wait for our news. Xiaobai warned. Feeling Xiaobai's concern, the old ancestor said excitedly, Your Majesty, please rest assured. We have been hiding here for so many years. It will not be so easy for the enemy to find us. Under everyone's gaze, Tangjing, Xiaobai, the fog and the wild dog all left. They came in a hurry and left in a hurry. They stayed here for less than a day. With the bloodthirsty scepter, it was very convenient for them to leave Suicide Valley. Moreover, Xiaobai could open up a secluded path for them to enter and exit without being affected by the poison. Of course, this path was very hidden and was not easy to be discovered by outsiders. It was also covered with various divine abilities to ensure that nothing would go wrong. Chapter 1522. Looking from afar, the imperial city was magnificent. It stood tall between the heavens and the earth. It was so vast that one could not see the end of it. The buildings of different heights were stacked on top of each other, blocking a lot of sight. There was no way to see all the corners clearly. The imperial city was a no-fly zone. Other than the imperial family and the imperial guards, no one else was allowed to fly. Otherwise, if they were discovered, they would be executed. This was to ensure the safety of the imperial city. The fog had been to the imperial city before and was familiar with the place. He warned them and they all remembered it. Although Wild Dog had lived in the outer sky for hundreds of years, he had only seen the imperial city from afar. He had never dared to enter. That would be walking right into a trap. But no one dared to do that. Wild Dog looked around guiltily and said nervously, "Senior, it's too dangerous for us to go in like this." After witnessing Tang Zheng's various tricks and techniques, Wild Dog did not dare to act rashly in front of him. Originally, Wild Dog's ugly face always attracted people's attention. But when they were about to reach the imperial city, no one paid attention to him. Because his ugliness paled in comparison. The people on the road were much uglier than him. The royal city was the core of the outer sky and there were countless races that came and went. Many of these races didn't fully transform into human form, so their appearances were all strange and strange. Wild Dogs, on the other hand, were much more pleasing to the eye. Wild Dog could not help but straighten his body, raising his eyebrows and exhaling. The tension all over his body seemed to relax a lot, and this place could not help but have a trace of friendliness and naturalness. The fog said in a low voice, "Everyone, the imperial city is heavily guarded. Although the traitor has taken over the world, his descendants still feel uneasy. They are very cautious. What's the point of living in fear like this?" Tang Jing curled his lips and said jokingly. Xiaobai looked at the imperial city angrily. In the middle of the imperial city, there was a pillar of light that shot up to the sky. At the top of the pillar there seemed to be a building, but it was not clear. "I will make them live in fear in the days to come. In fact, they will be scared out of their wits." Xiaobai suppressed his anger and roared like a wild beast. Tang Jing patted Xiaobai's shoulder and said, "Their carefree days are over. Don't worry, we will definitely take back everything that belongs to you." Xiaobai nodded heavily and pointed to the top of the light pillar, where the clouds and mist lingered. "That is the core of the imperial city, the imperial palace." When Tang Jing saw this for the first time, he couldn't help but be shocked. The heavens beyond heavens imperial palace was built in the clouds. "Then let's make Sky City," the mist introduced. Everyone in the outer heaven knew about Sky City's illustrious reputation because it was located high in the clouds, looking down on all living beings in the world. What a magical place! Tang Jing couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. He recalled the mountain peak that he saw floating in midair. It seemed that things in the beyond heaven liked to develop in the sky. The few of them carefully passed through layers upon layers of checks before they entered the imperial city. The imperial city was a mixed bag of good and bad people, so it wasn't difficult to sneak in. "This inspection seems to be stricter," the mist said doubtfully. "Of course they are strict. Because they already know that the imperial family has returned. Naturally, they are facing a great enemy," Tang Jing said without surprise. Last time when he and Xiaobai's consciousness crossed over, they used the identity of the imperial family to scare off the enemy. Naturally, the people in Sky City also knew. That's why they mustered so many people wanting to get information from the righteous cultivators. It was a pity that those people didn't know anything. It was precisely because of this that they were more worried. The fear of the unknown was truly frightening. On both sides of the street there were many shops, but every face was more or less nervous and fearful. The corners of their eyes kept glancing around as if they were afraid that something would happen. Boom boom boom. Suddenly there was the sound of stairs. Everyone scattered like birds and beasts, retreating to the sides of the street. The mist hurriedly pulled the few of them to a corner. Several pairs of eyes looked warily at the direction of the wind where the sound came from. A few gigantic unicorns that were neither donkeys nor horses, their bodies covered in scales that glittered with cold light, were charging straight towards them. Riding on the unicorns were several majestic-looking tall and strong fellows that were wrapped in armor from head to toe. A guy who looked like a commander pointed his finger in a direction. His subordinates flew up from their mounts and flocked to the place where his finger pointed. They stood in front of the few passers-by and directly grabbed them without asking any questions. "Ah, spare us, Lord City Guard, we are all His Majesty's subjects, not the opposition," the few of them cried out. However, it was of no use. They were still dragged away like dragging dead dogs. Then they were hung on the backs of their mounts and dragged on the street. No one dared to resist. Instead, they kept shrinking into the corner as if they were afraid that bad luck would befall them. Seeing this, Xiaobai clenched his fists. He could no longer control his anger and wanted to rush over to stop all this. Mist hurriedly pulled him back and anxiously shook her head. She advised, "Your Majesty, don't. These are all city guards. They are responsible for patrolling the imperial city. If you provoke them, a large number of city guards will come immediately. Even the imperial guards will be summoned. At that time we will be in danger in the imperial city. Are we just going to watch them do violence?" Xiaobai asked. "This is not the first time, but what can we do? In the future, when His Majesty takes back the Outland, all this will naturally be put to an end," Mist said earnestly, constantly hinting at Tang Jing with her eyes. She knew very well that only when Tang Jing gave the order Xiaobai would listen to it. Tang Jing, on the other hand, stared at the scene without blinking, not saying a word. Wild Dog said calmly, "What is there to be surprised about? In the Outland, except for the royal family and the nobles, the rest are ants. They can kill and rob at will. This has been going on for many years." Whitey glared fiercely at the Wild Dog. Wild Dog's heart trembled. He hurriedly shrank his neck and said stubbornly, "I am telling the truth. I have traveled far and wide and have seen too many of these things." Tang Jing had been silent. His eyes were fixed on the scene on the street. Without a doubt, looking at the adept manner of the other party, this was not the first time. Wild Dog was definitely not lying. Now the official was really unscrupulous and so violent. Since this was the case, it laid a solid foundation for Xiaobai's return. The one who wins the hearts of the people controls the world. Perhaps the people in power did not understand the true meaning of this sentence. "Xiaobai, don't be impulsive. We have more important things to do. The crimes they have committed, we will remember them. Justice will come eventually, it is just late. Moreover, justice will come soon." Tang Jing finally opened his mouth. Xiaobai's momentum suddenly dropped. He took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. He knew that his master was far-sighted and he was too rash. He gritted his teeth and all his anger passed from the soles of his feet to the rocks on the ground. Crack, crack, crack. The rocks cracked inch by inch, reaching deep into the ground. In order to avoid being discovered, they left the street from a remote place without leaving a trace. As soon as they left, the group of city guards rushed to the place where they had just stood. Suddenly, the mount raised its front hooves high. Half of its body was pulled up by its master and it stopped. Bang! The city guard jumped off his mount and landed in front of Xiaobai. His eyes were bright and full of expression as if there were lightning flashing. He stared straight at the cracked stone slabs. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1523. The city guard's eyes were like torches as he stared at the cracked ground. With a point of his finger, a ray of light landed on the ground, and a huge hole was torn open, revealing what was below. It had completely melted and turned into magma, emitting a blazing aura. The other city guards exclaimed and asked in surprise, "Sir, what's going on?" The city guard's eyes were deep, and there was a trace of imperceptible fear in his eyes. He pondered for a long time without saying a word. Only he knew that the imperial family had returned. The rumor was indeed true. The imperial family had really returned. Only the imperial family could do this. The legendary flame that could burn everything in the world looked like this. He took a deep breath and suppressed the fear in his heart. He had never seen the imperial family, but he had heard a lot of rumors about them. The more the government suppressed them, the more there was a market for such rumors. Therefore, as the city guard, he knew more details than others. He also knew that the current His Majesty did not rightfully possess all that he had today. He straightened his body, glanced at his subordinates majestically and ordered, "Pass down my order. Seal off this street and arrest all suspicious people." He did not need to give a reason at all. As soon as the order was passed down, the street was immediately in chaos, and screams of alarm rose and fell. Many innocent people were arrested. Fortunately, Tang Jing and the others left in time. Otherwise, there would definitely be a conflict with them. The city guard did not even look at those who were arrested. He also knew that the imperial family he was looking for was definitely not among them. He only did this to report to his superiors. He hurriedly rushed in the direction of Sky City. His mount rampaged and his rumbling footsteps resounded through the streets. Everywhere he passed, pedestrians avoided him. After a while, he arrived at a huge building. This building was located directly below Sky City, and the light pillar that connected Sky City to the sky came from here. This building was heavily guarded and outsiders could not get close at all. Not long after, the light pillar's light increased greatly, and many people went straight to Sky City from the light pillar and disappeared from Sky City. Tang Zheng and the others came not far from this building without anyone noticing and saw this scene from afar. "Did they go to Sky City from here?" Tang Jing asked curiously. Flying was forbidden in the imperial city, unless one was a noble or a member of the imperial family. Especially below the imperial family, even the nobles were not allowed to fly. As a result, if the nobles wanted to enter the sky castle, they could only rely on this pillar of light. The light pillar was similar to an elevator in the human world, instantly transporting people to Sky City. It was convenient, fast, and easy to manage. The mist explained, "Your guess is correct. This is the only way for people other than the royal family to enter Sky City. Random people can't enter Sky City at all." Tang Jing frowned. If they couldn't reach Sky City, wouldn't they have to return empty-handed? Should I barge in and force my way into Sky City? In this way they would be completely exposed. Tang Jing was not so arrogant as to think that he could dominate the imperial city with just these few people. Xiao Bai looked deeply into Tang Zheng's eyes. He understood the worry in his heart and said, "Master, don't worry. I already have a plan." "The plan?" Tang Jing looked at him in surprise. Xiao Bai pointed at his head proudly and said, "The memories I inherited are a precious treasure. Among them is a way to reach Sky City without anyone knowing." Tang Jing raised his thick eyebrows, overjoyed. "Is that so?" Xiao Bai nodded heavily. "Of course." After a pause, he deliberately said mysteriously, "Just follow me." Tang Jing knew very well that Xiao Bai was not one to lie. He must be very confident, so he signaled to the other two and followed Xiao Bai's footsteps, bypassing the magnificent building in front of them. The few of them avoided the crowd, walking more and more remote, to the point that there was a gloomy feeling. Wild Dog subconsciously tightened his clothes and asked curiously, "Where are we going? Why do I feel so gloomy, like we've come to a cemetery?" Unknowingly, Xiao Bai's expression had become very serious and dignified. After listening to Wild Dog's words, he solemnly said, "This is the cemetery of the royal family. Don't talk nonsense and tarnish the ancestors of the royal family." Wild Dog subconsciously withdrew his tongue, looked around and said bitterly, "I see, I definitely don't mean to disrespect the ancestors of the royal family." Looking at Xiao Bai's expression, Tang Jing understood Xiao Bai's mood. This was equivalent to the history of the royal family, the place where many of the royal family members were buried. As a descendant of the royal family, Xiao Bai's mood was heavy as one could imagine. The atmosphere suddenly became serious. Suddenly Xiao Bai's footsteps stopped, his eyes almost spewing fire, staring angrily in front. "What's wrong?" Tang Jing asked, looking forward. His heart suddenly tightened and he stared in front of him dumbfounded. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. What did they see? They saw many broken tombstones lying in the mud. The handwriting on them had long been covered with mud and could not be recognized at all. This large graveyard was like this, causing people to tremble in fear. For Xiao Bai, this was the fuse that ignited the anger in his heart. He was so angry that his whole body trembled, his feet seemed to be filled with lead, and he walked step by step towards the cemetery. The cemetery has been completely destroyed. Wild Dog was speechless, unable to believe the scene in front of him. Without a doubt, this must be the many crimes that the traitor had committed. Not only did he not let the living royal family go, he did not even let the dead royal family go. He actually destroyed the graves of the royal family. In fact, this was not hard to imagine. In order to consolidate his position, the traitor had to destroy the prestige of the royal family to the greatest extent. Destroying the graves of the royal family was equivalent to destroying the roots of the royal family. This did not require too much effort, and the results were obvious. Naturally, it was his first choice. Moreover, this could also deter others. Even the royal family's cemetery was not bad, so if others wanted to go against him, they would naturally have to weigh their own strength. Xiao Bai lifted a tombstone from the mud and gently wiped the mud off it, his hands trembling. "I will kill the descendants of that traitor and make them pay with blood," Xiao Bai said through gritted teeth, his hands clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his hands, but he did not notice. Tang Jing held his shoulder and comforted him. "We will definitely take back everything that belongs to the royal family." Xiao Bai put down the tombstone and strode into the depths of the tombstone. The light around him was getting darker and darker, and several people followed his footsteps. Xiao Bai stopped, his mouth muttering an obscure and difficult to understand chant. His hands flipped, and one after another he slapped the void. Boom! A door opened with a bang. "This is the transmission formation to Sky City, the secret passage for our royal family to worship our ancestors. Apart from the royal family, no one else will know. It is absolutely safe." To read the latest novel, please visit Chapter 1524. Teleportation Array. Everyone was overjoyed. With this passage, they would be able to reach Sky City without anyone noticing. They wouldn't have to return empty-handed. The group immediately stepped through the door and arrived at another place in the next second. They were in ruins, but from the ruins, it could be seen that this place used to be very grand and extraordinary. Xiao Bai gnashed his teeth, his eyes almost spitting fire as he said, "This is the royal family's ancestral shrine, but it was destroyed by that traitor. That traitor not only destroyed the royal family's tombs, he didn't even let the ancestral shrine go. He was unscrupulous." They didn't see any other traces of people in the ruins, which made it easy for them to hide their tracks. What entered their eyes was a magnificent group of palaces. It was impossible to imagine what it looked like from the ground. Only when they were in it did they understand how magnificent Sky City was. It was several times larger than the imperial city in the human world. A person in it was like a grain of sand falling into a pile of sand, inconspicuous at all. Xiao Bai had detailed information about Sky City's layout in his memories. However, after so many years, who knew how much had changed? Thus, they didn't dare to be brazen and carefully advanced towards the core of Sky City. Gradually, they saw pairs of patrolling Imperial guards. These Imperial guards were all holding magic weapons and riding strange beasts. They were strict and orderly, patrolling Sky City from above. Outside Sky City were the city guards patrolling, and inside Sky City were the Imperial guards. Both forces couldn't be underestimated. Although Fog had come to the Imperial City several times to gather information, she had never gone up to Sky City. It was simply too dangerous. Moreover, she didn't have a way to silently come up. "This time we must catch that traitor's trusted aide. If we can catch the guy on the throne, that would naturally be the best," Tang Jing said in a deep voice. After that traitor seized the world, he also openly proclaimed himself king and gave himself the title of Hao Tianwang. His descendant, who was the person on the throne, gave himself the title of King Wuling. All of this was told to them by Fog. King Wuling lived in seclusion and very few people had seen his true face. It was indeed not an easy task to find King Wuling in this vast complex of buildings. Tang Jing suddenly had an idea and said, "Maybe it's not that hard. I can catch a guard and use the soul-searching technique on him. Then we'll know all the answers." The soul-searching art was the Devil Clan's art, and Wild Dog was no stranger to it. He was very surprised that Tang Jing knew the soul-searching art. But the Wild Dog tactfully did not say a word. The Fog did not know about the soul-searching technique. She frowned and looked at him curiously. At this time, a group of patrolling Imperial guards happened to pass by. Tang Jing quietly rushed out, the hidden sword lightly slit their throats, and several Imperial guards immediately lost their lives. Then he spared the life of one of the Imperial guards. His big hand grabbed the other's head, and a lot of information flowed into his brain like a tide. His eyes lit up. These Imperial guards really knew a lot of information. He already knew that the palace where King Wuling lived was still some distance away. Those few mounts wanted to resist, but they were also taken care of by Tang Jing. He used the sky-swallowing technique to suck them into the black hole, turning them into energy in the heaven realm. Wear their clothes and armor and change into their appearance. This way we can avoid exposing ourselves as much as possible. Tang Jing advised. The transformation technique was not complicated for them. They all changed into the appearance of the dead Imperial guards, and patrolled the city like they were supposed to. With the expert Tang Jing and Xiao Bai who were familiar with the road, the two of them worked together, and with the disguise, they easily avoided most of the Imperial guards. Step by step they went deep into the heart of Sky City. It's really strange. Although Sky City's security is tight, there are more loopholes to take advantage of than the Imperial City. After walking around, Tang Jing clicked his tongue in wonder. Fog was not surprised and said, "The number of Imperial guards is limited. Only the most important people can become Imperial guards, but the number of city guards is many times more and the people are mixed together. So the city guards have enough manpower to control the streets, but the Imperial guards can't do this. Moreover, I'm afraid that King Wuling would never dream that we could quietly reach Sky City, which caused the situation to be tight on the outside and loose on the inside." Tang Jing gave Bewilderment Fog a deep look as her analysis was clear and logical. He was quite smart. "Hey, why is the security here so much tighter than other places?" Suddenly they stopped and looked at a nearby palace. They had not reached King Wuling's palace yet. Along the way there were many palaces, but the guards were mostly the same and there was nothing too out of the ordinary. But this palace was different. Moreover, this palace was completely black and lacked the magnificence of other palaces, giving people an inexplicable sense of oppression. "What kind of palace is this?" Tang Jing asked Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai tilted his head and looked at it for a while before shaking his head and saying, "This palace is newly built. In my memory this palace does not look like this." "A newly built palace? The Imperial guards are so strict, so there must be something unusual about it," Tang Jing said thoughtfully. Everyone nodded inwardly, thinking that this made sense. They all looked at the palace and saw the words Lunar Temple written on the plaque. "Then let's go in first and see if there are any unexpected gains," Tang Jing thought and said. The others looked at each other and did not have any objections. "Okay, let's go in." These people looked like Imperial guards. They walked into Lunar Temple as usual. However, an angry roar sounded. "Stop. Are you all blind? This is Lunar Temple, not other palaces. How can you come and go as you please?" A few Imperial guards blocked their way. They looked ferocious as if they were about to kill them. Tang Jing shivered. From this, it seemed that this Lunar Temple was even more unusual than they had imagined. Since this was the case, then they could not give up like this. He did not panic and said calmly, "We are here to help. Recently, the Imperial City has not been peaceful, so we received orders to increase the defense of Lunar Temple." "Whose orders?" The Imperial guards were skeptical. "His Majesty's orders." "Nonsense, how could we not know His Majesty's orders?" The other side was enraged and their expressions immediately changed. "Who are you, daring to intrude into Lunar Temple? How audacious, take them down." With this order the Imperial guards swarmed over. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The hidden profound sword flew up and several sword lights fell around the palace. In an instant, a restriction was quietly activated around the palace. Restriction. Tang Jing hurriedly set up a restriction. Restriction was a type of array that could isolate the outside world for hundreds or thousands of years, just like the restriction on Mount Buzhou that had isolated the Hundred Faces Star Sovereign from the outside world for tens of thousands of years. However, Tang Jing's restriction was not that strong and could only isolate the outside world for a period of time to buy them more time. They all understood Tang Jing's intention. Since they were already here, they might as well take things as they came. No one retreated. In fact, even the weakest wild dog's face was flushed red and he became excited. At this moment the Imperial guards rushed in front of them. These Imperial guards were not weak. Most of them were in the soul formation realm, similar to the fog but far stronger than Wild Dog. However, with Tang Zheng and Xiao Bai, two Mahayana realm experts, these Imperial Guards were naturally like chickens and dogs. Before the Imperial Guards rushed in front of them, Tang Zheng's sword had already slashed their necks. Blood splattered and their heads were separated from their bodies. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1525. With a single shout, the killing intent filled the air. Tang Zheng was the first to rush out. The hidden sword flashed and the Imperial Guards fell one by one. Xiao Bai did not want to fall behind. A ball of flame shot out from his hand, turning into fireballs that danced among the Imperial Guards. When the fireballs appeared, the Imperial Guards were stunned. They looked at him in disbelief. The Imperial Guards were a higher level than the city guards. Among the city guards, only the city guards knew about the Imperial family. Even the normal Imperial Guards knew about the Imperial family. From this, it could be seen that the hierarchy of the outer heavens was very strict. Imperial family. The Imperial Guards exclaimed. They were scared out of their wits by Xiao Bai's identity. There were too many legends about the Imperial family. One of them was that the Imperial family was good at controlling fire. They were practically the god of fire. Because of this, ever since the Imperial family disappeared, there were very few people who could control fire. Even if there were people who could control fire, they all gave up on this ability. This was because, whether it was Hao Tianwang or the current King Wuling, they hated the art of controlling fire to an unbelievable extent. Many people who were good at controlling fire were killed by the authorities. This caused no one to dare to use the fire-controlling divine ability openly. No one was even willing to learn it. To use the fire-controlling divine ability openly in the city in the sky, other than the Imperial family, who else could it be? Xiao Bai heard their exclamations but was unmoved. He said coldly, "Yes, the Imperial family is back. The end of you traitors is here." Whoosh! A few fireballs enveloped the Imperial Guards. Before they could even let out a scream, they were completely refined by the flames and disappeared into the air. The fog and Wild Dog witnessed everything. Before they could even do anything, all the Praetorian Guards had fallen. The two of them looked at each other and smacked their lips. They were shocked. They thought that they had to be careful and cautious, but who would have thought that with just a word of disagreement Tang Zheng and Little White would cooperate so well, killing in all directions. This was so satisfying. For so many years he had suffered too much. It felt so good to be able to hold his head high. Tang Zheng and Little White stopped at the same time. Looking at the messy battlefield, they looked at each other speechlessly. Wild Dog exclaimed, "It's really wonderful." The mist also nodded. "Your Majesty, you are really amazing. Master is more powerful," Xiao Bai said indifferently as his gaze fell on Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng shook his head as his deep eyes stared at the palace in front of him. The palace was pitch black, completely different from the other palaces, and an invisible pressure assaulted his senses. At this moment he was certain that this palace was definitely not simple. He had to go in and take a look. When we go in later we must be careful. I have a premonition that there will be danger in the palace. Just now there were quite a few Imperial Guards, more than the other palaces, but the real danger has just begun. Tang Zheng warned in a deep voice. The few of them nodded silently. The atmosphere became solemn and heavy as they walked into the palace together. The front door of the palace was a huge stone door, which was quite different from the wooden door of the other palaces. "I will open the door." Wild Dog did not have time to join the battle and felt that he did not contribute, so he volunteered at this moment. Wild Dog pressed his hands on the stone door and roared loudly. His power was constantly gushing out. Creak. The stone door opened little by little. Wild Dog's cheeks were red and his eyes were rolled out. Together with his appearance he looked a little ferocious. Finally he did his job and pushed the stone door open. It was pitch black inside the stone door. Even the sunlight outside could not shine in. Whoosh! Suddenly a fishy wind blew in their faces. Wild Dog didn't even have time to catch his breath. With a scream, his figure disappeared behind the stone door, dragged into the darkness. What is that? The few of them stared with their eyes wide open, but they did not see clearly what it was. There was no movement behind the stone door. Everything seemed to have returned to normal. Wild Dog did not make any sound. No one knew if he had encountered an accident. Tang Jing clenched his teeth. The wild dog had followed him here and he had not been able to protect his safety. He fell into deep self-reproach. He took a deep breath and temporarily put all the distracting thoughts behind him. Danger is coming. Be careful. Tang Jing stepped into the stone door step by step. Xiao Bai and the fog followed him carefully. A fireball rose from Xiao Bai's palm, illuminating the surroundings. However, the surrounding darkness was like a viscous lake. It actually prevented the light from shining too far, restricting the light. Whoosh! The fishy wind came again. Tang Jing's pupils shrank. With a swoosh, he lit up the hidden mystic sword. Swish! The hidden mystic sword slashed down, creating a large string of sparks in the darkness. Tang Jing's touch was very strong. He felt that the hidden mystic sword was cut off from something. It was very hard, so it created so many sparks. It's a big guy. Xiao Bai vaguely saw a figure. Is it a beast? Tang Jing asked curiously. It must be. Xiao Bai said without hesitation. Tang Jing snorted and said, hiding the head but showing the tail. Then I will force you to show yourself. Swish swish swish. A series of sword lights appeared shooting forward. Finally they saw a huge silhouette in front of them. A huge head with a horn in the middle of its forehead. Its mouth was filled with fangs and saliva was dripping from the corner of its mouth. It pounced towards Tang Jing, but was intercepted by the hidden mystic sword. Swish swish swish. Rays of cold light shot out from the horn and tangled with the sword lights. However, the hidden mystic sword was very powerful. It defeated the opponent in a few moves. The hidden mystic sword fiercely chopped down on the horn. Crack! The horn was broken into two sections. Ayo! The bloody mouth let out a shrill cry. Kept shaking. Its lantern-sized eyes were filled with a fierce light. Wanted to eat him alive. Tang Jing was not satisfied with the result. He raised his hand and the hidden mystic sword chopped down on its neck. Boo! The bloody light that shot up to the sky dyed the dark space red. A strong wind blew like a whirlwind. It was nauseating. Master, be careful. Suddenly Xiao Bai sucked in a breath of cold air and shouted in shock. The fireball in his hand had already soared into the sky and attacked the darkness. Tang Jing's eyebrows furrowed as he felt another wave of fishy wind sweep over. There's more. Tang Jing roared. He did not even raise his head. His sword soared into the sky. Boo! Fresh blood splattered and sprayed towards him. He floated back, avoiding the blood. The fireball also arrived. With a rumbling sound, it exploded in the air and turned into countless little flames. It completely lit up the surroundings. They sucked in a breath of cold air. Because they clearly saw the scene in front of them. A three-headed monster was in front of them. It looked down on them and stared at them like a tiger eyeing its prey. Only one of its heads had already left its body and fell to the ground. However, the other two heads still gave people a deep shock. Their ferocious gazes made people tremble in fear. To read the latest novel, please visit Chapter 1526. Two pairs of giant eyes glared fiercely at the group. It bared its fangs and let out a low roar of anger from the depths of its throat. Roar. The two roars sounded at the same time, shaking the roof and causing a cloud of dust to fall down. This seems to be the mount of that traitor. Miwu suddenly thought of something and said. Tang Jing was shocked and asked, How Tian Wang? Yes, it's his mount called the three-headed lion. Miwu added. Humph, now you can only call it two-headed lion. Xiao Bai said disdainfully. Since the other party was the traitor's mount, then it must have committed countless crimes in the past. The traitor was dead and there was no way to take revenge on him personally. Why not kill this three-headed lion and avenge those who sacrificed themselves in the past? The three-headed lion understood Xiao Bai's words and seemed to have been greatly provoked. It roared and shook its head before charging straight at Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai transformed back into his true form with a shake of his body. His four hooves stepped on the fire wheels as he looked at the other party in high spirits and said, Today I'll let you know who's the stronger one. Tang Jing understood Xiao Bai's feelings very well, so he didn't join in the battle. Instead he retreated a few steps and left the battlefield to Xiao Bai and the three-headed lion. The three-headed lion turned pale with fright after seeing Xiao Bai's true form. Apparently, It recognized that Xiao Bai was a member of the imperial family. The three-headed lion's muscles tensed up. The three-headed lion's body was already very large to begin with. After its body tensed up, the lines of its muscles were very obvious, hidden under its scales. However, in front of Xiao Bai, this ferocious beast seemed to be very afraid. This was a fear that came from the depths of its soul and had been there for a long time. Xiao Bai didn't pay attention to the other party's fear. The horns on his head burst into flames. With a boom, the red light soared into the sky and landed in front of the three-headed lion. The three-headed lion seemed to have woken up from a dream, and it hurriedly retreated. At the same time, a ray of light rushed out from its remaining two horns, blocking the flames. "Can you stop me?" Xiao Bai ignored it. The flames surged to instantly envelop the three-headed viper's entire body. Roar! The three-headed hoe let out a miserable shriek as it kept twisting its body in an attempt to extinguish the flames. However, Xiao Bai's flames were different from ordinary flames. They were not easy to extinguish. Therefore, the three-headed viper could only watch as the flames slowly seeped into its skin through the air around its scales. Boom! With an explosion, one of its heads exploded into pieces, turning into balls of flames that fell to the ground. The remaining head saved its life for the time being. It kept retreating and fleeing, leaving behind a trail of flames in the darkness. Chase. Xiao Bai was the first to give chase. The fire wheel spun like a beam of light as it quickly chased after him. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of intense fighting could be heard in the darkness. Tang Zheng and the others also caught up. They finally saw Xiao Bai and the three-headed lion fighting fiercely. They were fighting with all their might, neither letting the other go. Huh. Why is this place so cold? Suddenly, Tang Jing frowned in surprise. After his reminder, the fog and wild dog finally reacted. They tensed up and felt much colder. They looked around and realized that the walls of the palace were actually covered with a thick layer of ice. No wonder the cold was so strong that even people like them who were immune to both heat and cold could feel it. Look at the ground. The fog suddenly pointed at the ground. The few of them took a closer look and saw that there were cracks on the ground. Streams of cold air were coming out from the cracks and swirling around like bursts of green smoke. It's also ice below. They immediately understood. The outside of the palace looked completely dark. It was definitely hard to imagine that this was a complete ice cave. If a normal person came here, they would have been frozen into popsicles. Even they felt that their blood seemed to be showing signs of freezing. It was obvious how cold it was. Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly had a bad premonition and anxiously looked at Little White. In just a short while, the battle had actually changed. Originally, Xiao Bai had the upper hand in every aspect, forcing the three-headed lion to retreat step by step. It was very difficult for him to defend, but now there was a drastic change. Xiao Bai's flames seemed to have a problem. Its power was greatly reduced, and the three-headed lion had no flames on its body. It was like a fish in water, and its attack power was greatly increased. Whoosh! The three-headed lion fiercely bit at Xiao Bai. Its long fangs were extremely terrifying. Its remaining two heads were gone, leaving only two bloody necks. The flames flew out from Xiao Bai's body. However, just as the flames were about to touch the three-headed lion, they were inexplicably extinguished in mid-air. Ah! Tang Jing, who witnessed all of this, couldn't help but cry out in surprise. He was very clear about the power of Xiao Bai's flames. They could almost burn everything. This was something that had never happened before, but it happened just like that. It was really inconceivable to the extreme. How could this be? Miwu was also shocked. In her mind, Xiao Bai was invincible and invincible. How could he drop the ball like this? Xiao Bai was also very puzzled. He could clearly feel that his magic power was being restricted. Regardless of whether it was channeling his power or using his abilities, they were all greatly reduced. Especially after he chased here, this feeling became even more intense. It was as if there was some mysterious power suppressing him. The three-headed lion seemed to be very pleased with itself. A sinister smile appeared on its face as it opened its mouth and bit at Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai's flames had failed, and the three-headed lion thought that Xiao Bai wouldn't be able to resist it. However, it was wrong. A sword light suddenly appeared in front of it. With a pft, it directly cut off two of its fangs. The three-headed lion felt the pain and hurriedly fled. Tang Jing saved Xiao Bai and hurriedly rushed to his side. He asked with concern, Xiaobai, are you okay? Xiaobai transformed into a human and looked at Tang Jing while panting. His expression kept changing as he said, Master, this palace is very strange. Tang Jing nodded heavily. He had already sensed that this palace was definitely suppressing Xiaobai. That was why his magic had failed. However, the others were not affected by this restriction. This meant that this suppression was specifically targeted at Xiaobai. Or, to put it more bluntly, it was specifically targeted at the imperial family. The traitors had always been afraid of the imperial family. They were deeply afraid that the imperial family would come back for revenge and take away everything that belonged to them. That was why they built this new palace to suppress the imperial family's abilities. However, this palace was an inanimate object. As long as the imperial family didn't enter, how much could it suppress the imperial family? For a moment, Tang Jing couldn't figure out what was going on. His gaze fell on the three-headed lion that was hiding far away. Perhaps it could answer this question. Swoosh. Without hesitation he raised his sword and attacked. Xiaobai was being suppressed, but didn't he still have his mother? Could the three-headed lion turn the tables? To read a novel without mistakes, please visit Chapter 1527. Once the sword was unleashed, there was no turning back. In the blink of an eye, the hidden mystic sword arrived in front of the three-headed hoe. The three-headed hoe knew how powerful the hidden mystic sword was, and it did not want to lose its last head to the hidden mystic sword. Thus, it let out a loud roar and stomped its front foot on the ground. Bang! The ground cracked open and an ice wall rose from the ground to protect it. Wah! Like the sound of ripping silk, the ice wall was cut into two halves from the middle and collapsed with a loud crash. The sword of hidden mysteries attack did not diminish, ruthlessly chopping down on the head of the three-headed viper. Its horn shone brightly as it attempted to intercept. The light shattered and the sword of hidden Xian happened to cut the horn in half. The sword of hidden Xian continued downward, drawing a long line of blood on the head of the three-headed venomous snake. The blood line extended all the way to its lower body. The three-headed viper seemed to have been struck by a body-fixing spell. It stood there motionless, its eyes glazed over, and the aura of death rose up spontaneously, occupying its pupils. Drip, drip. Drops of blood seeped out from the bloodlines and landed on the ground. In an instant the ground was dyed red. The blood followed the cracks and seeped into the ground. Clang! With a loud bang, the three-headed viper's body collapsed to the ground like a small mountain collapsing. It smashed into the ground and splashed everywhere, revealing the layer of ice underneath. Not only were the walls of the palace covered in ice, but even the ground was also covered in ice. It was truly an ice cave. The blood dyed the ice red and seeped into the ice. It was a strange sight. Looking at the corpse of the three-headed venomous snake, the few of them heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. However, Xiaobai's expression was still extremely solemn because the mysterious power that suppressed him still hadn't disappeared. In fact, it hadn't weakened in the slightest. This meant that killing the three-hoe did not solve the problem. He looked at the corpse of the three-headed viper and said in a deep voice, "There must be something else hidden here. Otherwise, the enemy wouldn't have gone to such great lengths to build such a palace in Sky City." The others' expressions turned cold as they nodded in agreement. Xiaobai's words made sense. But the key point was that there were no other living things in this palace, so what could be suppressing Xiaobai? Since we found something strange, let's split up and look for it. Tang Jing was at his wits' end, so he said. The others nodded and started searching in different corners. As time passed, the restriction outside the palace weakened. If he continued to waste time, it was very likely that the enemy would discover his whereabouts, and it would not be easy to find King Wuling again. However, after searching for a long time, he still couldn't find anything. Other than ice, there was nothing else in the palace. Tang Jing slowly stopped and stared at the layer of ice on the ground. He didn't know how thick that layer of ice was. An idea flashed through his mind and he said thoughtfully, "Do you think there will be something under the ice?" The walls of the palace were not thick. Only the ice layer on the ground was not too deep. If there was a problem, it could only fall on the ice layer below the ground. This was a method of elimination. After eliminating all other impossible possibilities, there was only one possibility left. The others were startled and stopped one after another. They stared at the ice on the ground and said, Then are we going to break this ice? That's right. Tang Jing decisively said. I'll do it. Xiao Bai volunteered. I want to see what kind of damned thing is hidden below that can actually suppress my strength. Boom. Xiao Bai stomped heavily on the ice. With a loud sound, the ice layer immediately cracked open, and then many thin cracks appeared. Not long after, these cracks actually covered the entire ice layer. The three-headed venomous snake's blood just happened to follow these cracks, quickly spreading deeper. The blood dyed the entire ice layer red, causing the ice layer to release a strange red color. So. Icicles shot out from the ice layer one after another, accurately aiming at the group. Careful. Tang Jing shouted. The hidden profound sword was unstoppable, shattering all the icicles that were shot at him. The other three people were not injured, but they were all shocked. Everyone realized that the problem was indeed under the ice layer. The ice layer is changing again. Suddenly, a cry of surprise sounded out. It was the fog that showed some clues. The ice layer was actually like a small mountain, slowly rising from the ground as if it was about to form an ice mountain. I'll deal with him. Tang Jing roared, and the hidden profound sword ruthlessly slashed at the ice layer. Ice sputtered and a large crack appeared. Everyone's pupils shrank and they all saw the scene under the crack at the same time. There was actually a figure in the center of the ice layer. There's someone. Tang Jing was shocked. He never thought that there would be a person under the ice layer. Who was this person? Was he dead or alive? What did it have to do with the mysterious power that suppressed Xiao Bai? Questions came one after another, but Tang Jing was even more confused. So without any hesitation he controlled the hidden profound sword and tried to slash at the ice layer again. Who dares to break into the city in the sky? However, a furious roar sounded outside the palace. The few people were shocked. They knew that the restriction was gone. They were discovered by the enemy, and the enemy's main force must be waiting outside. So, a light flew in from the entrance of the palace. It was a shining ice sword. In a flash, it arrived in front of Tang Jing. He had to use the hidden profound sword to meet the ice sword. Clang. There were no sparks, only the cold air burst out in all directions. At the same time, the light at the entrance of the palace suddenly dimmed. The shadows blocked the entrance and the exit was blocked. They had just found a clue and now they were discovered by the enemy. This was really not the right time. Tang Jing secretly gritted his teeth. He knew that it would not be easy to figure out the mystery under the ice layer. At this critical moment, the most important thing was to save the lives of the few people. Everyone be careful. If we can't beat them, we will retreat. Tang Jing warned. He did not immediately retreat, which meant that he did not intend to return empty-handed. He was prepared to work harder to get more information. This was not a wasted trip. The ice sword did not gain any advantage. It flew back and fell into the hands of a person. This person was tall and strong. He was very powerful. At first glance, it was obvious that he was a person of high status. Tang Jing was not in the mood to look. More of his attention was attracted to the figure in the ice layer. He was not willing to give up. Taking advantage of this gap, he finally used the hidden profound sword again. He did not care about the threat of the person who came and slashed at the ice layer. How dare you? The person who came was livid. He was furious to the extreme. He roared, his voice like thunder. Whoosh! The ice sword flew out of his hand and stabbed at Tang Jing's back. Don't hurt the master. Xiao Bai was in a difficult position. Since this damned place suppressed his magic and he could not use his flames normally, he had to use a new magic weapon. The bloodthirsty scepter flew up and a bloody light burst out. The blood on the ground quickly flew towards the bloodthirsty scepter and wrapped around it. Suddenly, the bloodthirsty scepter seemed to have grown many times, and it stood in front of the ice sword. Boom! Chapter 1528. Lucian's true face. Everyone looked over at the same time and they were all shocked. This face was actually somewhat similar to the person who had just arrived, and it was obvious that they were related by blood. Hao Tianwang. Mi Wu immediately recognized the other party and she screamed in shock. The Grand Elder had told them too many times about Hao Tianwang's appearance, so Mi Wu was very familiar with it, and she would never forget it even in death. Although this was the first time she had seen the real person, she recognized him at a glance. It was obvious that this person was King Wulin. Seeing this scene, King Wuling flew into a rage. How dare you? The ice sword shone brightly, and in an instant the ice in the palace seemed to be summoned. The pieces of ice seemed to come alive, flying into the sky and aiming at the few people. Xiao Bai pointed his finger, and the bloodthirsty scepter had already absorbed all the blood on the ground, and a blood-red light shrouded the surroundings. With a roar from Xiao Bai, the bloodthirsty scepter underwent an earth-shattering change. The blood completely emerged from the tip of the scepter, and turned into thousands of threads like vines, quickly spreading towards King Wuling. Kill! A roar filled with killing intent burst out from King Wuling's mouth. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The sound of air being torn apart rang out, and the air was filled with cold air, and the wild dog couldn't help but shiver. Previously, he had been captured by the three-headed venomous snake and had fallen into darkness. If it wasn't for Tang Jing chasing after him in time, he would probably have lost his life. Thus, seeing this scene, the wild dog trembled. Although he knew that he was no match for the enemy, he still took out his transcendent treasure, and prepared to fight to the death with the enemy. Mi Wu shook her 10 fingers, and a cloud of fog spread out from her fingertips, causing the palace to be shrouded in fog. Wherever the ice passed, the fog was frozen and solidified into ice crystals. Thousands of threads of blood also tore through the fog and clashed with the ice. Ping ping ping. A series of loud sounds rang out. That was the sound of the ice colliding with the blood threads, exploding into pieces. However, the blood threads couldn't hold on for long either. Almost at the same time, the blood threads and ice were exhausted. The ice sword and the bloodthirsty scepter clashed, and 2 different lights burst out from the point of contact. Boom. One was white and one was red. The radiance was so bright that it dyed the palace and the fog into a different color. Xiao Bai gritted his teeth. He finally realized how powerful King Wuling was. They had only just clashed, but he already knew that King Wuling was stronger than him. However, his bloodthirsty scepter was stronger than the ice sword. That was why they were in such a stalemate. Xiao Bai had blocked King Wuling's attack almost single-handedly. King Wuling looked at Xiao Bai in shock and asked, "What kind of magical weapon is this?" Xiao Bai coldly snorted and said, "I will take back everything that you took from my ancestor." Whoosh. The bloodthirsty scepter's radiance actually overshadowed the ice sword. King Wuling was dumbfounded. He looked at Xiao Bai in despair and said, "You're a member of the imperial family?" Xiao Bai was in human form, so King Wuling didn't recognize him immediately. King Wuling had been influenced by the imperial family since he was young. He had always felt a deep sense of apprehension toward them, but unfortunately he had never truly fought them. However, the imperial family was like a nail that had been buried in his heart long ago. He was so shocked now that he had finally met a member of the imperial family. This emotion didn't last long and he quickly calmed down. What was so great about the imperial family? Didn't they still lose to his father Hao Tianwang? Even the remnants of the imperial family were wiped out when they fought with all their might. Therefore he shouldn't be afraid of the imperial family. The imperial family wasn't as invincible as the legends said. History had already proven that his father had won once, so he would win a second time. Moreover, this time he would kill them all to prevent future troubles. He would make sure that the last remnants of the imperial family would disappear from the sky beyond heaven. No, they would disappear from this world, never to return. He had this strong confidence. In an instant his aura skyrocketed. The ice sword became incomparably sharp, as if it was unstoppable. It cut through the bloodthirsty scepter's blood-red light and drove straight in, forcing the scepter to retreat again and again. At the same time, the forbidden army swarmed in, completely blocking the entrance to the palace. With a few whooshing sounds, the forbidden army rushed in front of the fog and wild dog. They couldn't interfere with the battle between Xiao Bai and King Wuling. Moreover, the forbidden army knew that King Wuling hated it when people interrupted him when he was fighting. No forbidden army dared to provoke him. Therefore their targets became the fog, wild dog and Tang Jing. Tang Jing seemed to have lost his soul. He stared at Hao Tianwang without moving. His eyes were like lightning, unwilling to move away for even a second. Wild dog and the fog didn't know what he was thinking, but they knew that they couldn't let the forbidden army disturb him. Therefore they took up the task of defending the enemy. With a sway of his body he disappeared into the fog, blending into the rest of the fog. The forbidden army soldier at the front had blood spurting out from his neck. His head was separated from his body and his neck flew backward. The other Forbidden Army soldiers didn't retreat. Instead, they continued to attack without hesitation. Puff. Puff. Blood splattered everywhere, dyeing the palace red. This was the specialty of the Fog's attack. Although the Fog's cultivation wasn't higher than the Forbidden Army's, its attacks were everywhere, making it impossible for the enemy to escape. Wild Dog was much inferior. Although his courage was commendable and his giant hammer was impenetrable and majestic, his cultivation was far inferior to the Forbidden Army's. He was knocked down to the ground after a few moves. Fortunately, he had rich combat experience and had been at the brink of death many times. Therefore, he narrowly escaped from the Forbidden Army's magic weapons several times. Tang Jing seemed to be uninvolved. Suddenly, he didn't see the fierce fighting around him. His attention was completely attracted by Hao Tianwang. He wasn't stupid. He just found something strange about Hao Tianwang. Hao Tianwang should be dead. However, Hao Tianwang in the ice had a ruddy complexion. He was no different from a living person. Although his eyes were closed and he didn't have any aura, Tang Jing was restless. Especially the tomes of arcane, it was restless. The heavenly book cultivated the heavenly path, so it was very sensitive to the outside world. It was almost never like the current situation where it was ready to make a move. The only explanation was that the heavenly book had sensed something unusual. It was very likely that it was a huge threat. The heavenly book and Tang Jing had already merged into one. His body and the heavenly book were one. The heavenly book had sensed a threat, so it was warning Tang Jing. He should have left the palace immediately, but he didn't turn around. He wanted to figure out the situation. Why is the heavenly book so afraid of a dead person? There must be a reason that can be explained. His eyes burned as he stared unblinkingly at Hao Tianwang. Suddenly he had a flash of inspiration. An unimaginable thought popped up in his mind, causing him to open his mouth wide in shock. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1529. Unless he's not dead. When he blurted out these words, he seemed to be shocked as well. He couldn't be any more shocked. Although he wanted to deny this thought, it was as if it was magical. It quickly took root in his mind and he couldn't refute it at all. Hiss. He took a deep breath and suppressed the fear in his heart. He stared at Hao Tianwang with burning eyes. Gradually, the hidden mystic sword lit up, and his eyes became resolute. Whether you're dead or alive, I'll make you disappear from this world once and for all. He spat out a mouthful of turbid air and under the blazing sword light he disappeared. One with the sword. This ice clearly had an extremely strong defensive power, which was why he couldn't really attack Hao Tianwang's body. Therefore he chose to use his most powerful move, one with the sword. Whoosh! The hidden mystic sword flew towards Hao Tianwang. The others also noticed the situation and exclaimed, especially King Wuling. He was so shocked that his eyeballs almost fell out. No. King Wuling had already sensed the power of this sword, so he couldn't help but worry. Seeing King Wuling's reaction, Xiaobai was puzzled. He didn't know why Tang Jing was so determined to attack a corpse, and why King Wuling's reaction was so big. Xiaobai didn't understand, but that didn't stop him from trusting Tang Jing unconditionally. Therefore he didn't care about his safety and activated the Bloodthirst Scepter. This place only suppressed his fire-related divine ability, but it didn't stop him from activating the Bloodthirst Scepter. The Bloodthirst Scepter's light soared into the sky again, and all the blood of the dead Imperial Guards flew towards it and gathered on the Bloodthirst Scepter. Suddenly, bang, bang, bang. A series of shocking explosions rang out. Streaks of blood shot out from the Bloodthirst Scepter and hit a few Imperial Guards. They immediately exploded on the spot, and the blood quickly replenished the Bloodthirst Scepter. This scene shocked countless people. The might of the bloodthirsty scepter was too inconceivable. The Imperial Guards were not weaklings and yet they exploded so easily. They even became nutrients for the bloodthirsty scepter. Xiaobai didn't expect the bloodthirsty scepter to be so powerful. He could clearly feel the surging power within the scepter, as if it could destroy the heavens and earth. I'll give you a taste of it. Xiaobai gripped the bloodthirst scepter tightly. It was as if he and the scepter were connected by flesh and blood. Streams of blood flowed from his arm into the bloodthirst scepter. Several lines of blood appeared on the surface of the bloodthirst scepter. It was as if the scepter had come to life. The blood veins on the bloodthirst scepter swelled like thousands of ancient tree roots. They danced madly towards the ice sword. Poof, poof, poof. The ice sword cut off the blood veins one after another. However, the blood in the surroundings continued to replenish the bloodthirst scepter. The blood veins were cut off and regenerated. Finally, the ice sword stopped. It was wrapped up by the blood veins like a huge rice dumpling. It stopped in midair, motionless. Xiao Bai's forehead was covered in sweat. The pressure he was under was unimaginable. Even though the situation seemed to be settled, it was still not right. The ice sword was still cutting off the blood veins and the blood veins were regenerating. Only then did the ice sword stop. If the situation was out of balance, the scales of victory would be tilted. Boom. A deafening sound rang out and a shockwave shot up to the sky. With a loud bang, a huge hole appeared on the roof of the palace. Debris flew everywhere along with pieces of ice. At the same time, the walls of the palace collapsed softly as if they were made of tofu. Debris flew everywhere and smoke and dust rose everywhere. The palace was gone and only a cloud of dust was left. Coupled with the fog, it was impossible to see the situation clearly. The imperial guards outside the palace were so frightened that they all retreated. Some of them were even hit by the rocks and suffered serious injuries. A palace was gone in the blink of an eye, turning into ruins. The imperial guards outside did not know what had happened, but everyone knew that this palace was extraordinary. It was a forbidden area in Sky City. Other than King Wuling and the imperial guards on duty, no one else was allowed to enter. But now it was destroyed. The waves that were stirred up in their hearts were indescribable. As a result, the imperial guards stared at the ruins in shock. For a moment, no one rushed in to save them. In the ruins, no one could see each other. The lucky survivors who had escaped by chance felt their hearts beat faster. Bang, bang, bang. It was as if their hearts were about to jump out of their throats. The bloodthirsty scepter and the ice sword also returned to their master's hands. The light was completely gone, and their eyes wanted to see each other through the dust. The fog had also returned to its original form and stood beside Xiao Bai. Wild Dog was lying on the ground in a sorry state. It did not have time to stand up. Its eyes darted around trying to figure out the current situation. Everything was terrifyingly quiet. The imperial guards also surrounded King Wuling. They looked at each other and did not dare to act rashly. King Wuling's breathing was rapid. He was even more nervous than the imperial guards. He had seen the scene where the hidden sword hit Hao Tianwang. All of this was caused by that hit. He knew how serious it was. That was why he was so nervous and worried. Nothing must happen. Nothing must happen. King Wuling prayed silently in his heart. Whoosh. A gust of cold wind blew from the center of the ruins. It was very strange to see a wind blowing from a flat surface. Wherever the cold wind passed, there was not a single person who did not shiver. This cold wind was too strange. It even made these experts feel cold. Whoosh. Suddenly a sound broke through the air. A human figure flew out of the ruins and landed right beside Xiao Bai. Master! Seeing his face, Xiao Bai could not wait to shout. The fog and Wild Dog were also nervous. They looked at him worriedly. They did not know whether he was in a good or bad situation after that hit. They did not know what the result of that hit was. Tang Jing was not in a sorry state. But his face was extremely serious. It was like a black cloud was gathering around him. It made people's hearts sink. Tang Jing opened his mouth. He took a deep breath and said with difficulty, "Go, go, go." These two simple words stunned everyone. Wasn't the outcome of the battle still undecided? Why did he say go? Did something unexpected happen? They all looked at the center of the ruins. They could not see the situation clearly. But the more they could not see, the more uncertain they felt. But they all knew that something serious must have happened to make Tang Jing look like he was facing a great enemy. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1530. Only Tang Jing himself knew what had happened to him and why he asked everyone to leave quickly, but he had no time to explain. Seeing everyone confused and at a loss, he was extremely anxious and shouted, "Don't just stand there, go retreat." Only then did they wake up from a dream, especially Xiaobai. He knew Tang Zheng's style of doing things very well. He would never have such a big reaction unless it was really a critical moment. "Let's go." Xiaobai rushed out without hesitation. Wild Dog and the Fog also followed his footsteps, and the few of them rushed out of the ruins together. Fortunately, their reaction was very timely, greatly beyond King Wuling's expectations. When they rushed to the edge of the ruins, King Wuling saw the few of them escaping through the gradually disappearing fog. King Wuling's reaction was also very fast, and he shouted decisively, "Stop them." The Imperial guards on the periphery reacted, and a sky full of magic weapons greeted the few of them. "Somersault cloud." Tang Jing shouted, and the somersault cloud flew out, directly carrying the few of them and flew straight into the sky. All the attacks of the magic weapons were completely ineffective. King Wuling wanted to chase after them, but he was more worried about another thing, so he was furious and roared to the sky, "Catch them and bring them back." Then in a flash he rushed to the center of the ruins. The Imperial guards received the order and chased after the somersault cloud crazily. On the somersault cloud the few of them looked down. The Sky City had become much smaller and the figures on it had become like ants. But the Imperial guards were so dense that they covered the sky and the sun, and could not completely shake them off. "Master, what's going on?" Xiaobai finally had the chance to ask. Tang Jing calmed down, took a deep breath and said, "Hao Tianwang is alive." "Hao Tianwang is alive." The others turned pale with fright and exclaimed. This was especially true for Little White, whose eyes were wide open. "No," Tang Jing said again, interrupting their thoughts. "He didn't come back to life. He didn't die at all. He was just sealed. It was just like the scarlet lunar beast. It had sealed itself, and what sealed him was a layer of ice. This palace was specially built to seal him." Tang Jing talked non-stop, but every word was earth-shattering, shocking everyone. If Heavenly King Hao was sealed, then who sealed him? Is it himself or is it King Wuling? Many thoughts appeared in the minds of the others, and it was difficult for them to find an answer in such a short time. The anger in Xiaobai's eyes gradually condensed. He gritted his teeth and said, "Since Hao Tianwang isn't dead, I'll go find him for revenge." Xiaobai was about to jump down, but he was stopped by Tang Jing. "Xiaobai, don't be rash." "Master, I can't help but be rash. Hao Tianwang is my clan's enemy. If I don't kill him, how can those who died rest in peace?" Xiaobai said with grief. Tang Jing understood Xiaobai's feelings, but he still held on to Xiaobai tightly. He did not want him to pay a heavy price for being rash. "Xiaobai, listen to me. Hao Tianwang is not that simple. I have already fought with him once in the ruins. I can't describe what kind of power he has, but I know that even if we work together, we are definitely not his match." Tang Jing said solemnly. Although he was unwilling to admit this, it was the truth. He had no choice but to admit it. Xiaobai was stunned. He was very clear about his master's strength. Moreover, his master was stronger than him. If even he did not have the confidence, then he would not be able to kill Hao Tianwang. After a while, Xiaobai asked in disbelief, "Is he really that powerful?" Tang Jing could not help but recall what had happened earlier. Man and sword as one, striking the thick ice. The ice cracked and Hao Tianwang revealed his true body. A majestic and terrifying power surged out, causing Tang Jing to tremble. Originally there was no such aura before, but as soon as the ice disappeared, such a strange change occurred. How could it not be shocking? Tang Jing's reaction was very fast. Before the dust had settled, he made a prompt decision and once again used man and sword as one. The distance between the two sides was very short. Lightning flashed. With a loud rumble, the palace completely collapsed. The gap between the two attacks was so short that no one could tell that they were two consecutive attacks. Not only did the place where Hao Tianwang was standing collapse, but the ground also caved in rapidly, turning into a huge crater. However, Hao Tianwang remained unmoved. Although there was no ground beneath his feet, he was still standing in the air. He raised his eyes and glanced at Tang Jing. This seemingly calm glance caused all the attacks to vanish without harming Hao Tianwang in the slightest. Meanwhile, a sparkling and translucent light appeared on his body, just like the light emitted by ice. Tang Jing met that pair of eyes. With just a glance, he felt as if he had fallen into a boundless sea of corpses and blood. One had to know that Tang Jing did not have any inner demons, but the other party's glance contained such power. This was truly terrifying. However, the more terrifying thing was yet to come. A small ice crystal appeared at the tip of Hao Tianwang's finger, and with a "so" sound, it flew towards Tang Jing. Tang Jing anxiously held his sword horizontally to block the attack. When the ice crystal met the hidden profound sword, it shattered into pieces, but the fragments were like meteorites, fiercely striking Tang Jing's chest. His body immediately became like a bow that had been pulled into the shape of a full moon. The power he had to endure was unimaginable. A layer of metallic luster lit up on the surface of his body, resisting the power of the ice crystal with great difficulty. However, he was still like a cannonball, flying out from the center of the ruins and coincidentally landing beside Xiaobai and the others. He did not hear Hao Tianwang mutter to himself after seeing the golden light on his body, "Chaotic Vajra spell." Hao Tianwang actually knew about the Chaotic Vajra spell. If Tang Jing heard these words, he would definitely have more thoughts about this cultivation technique. Hearing Tang Jing's narration, the other three were so shocked that their jaws almost fell to the ground. The mist said in shock, "Hao Tianwang seems to be much more powerful than before." Back then, Hao Tianwang was already at the 8th stage of the Mahayana realm, which was already one of the top cultivators in the sky beyond heaven. He was on par with the ancestor back then and was only slightly weaker than the late emperor. Now it seemed that Heavenly King Hao's cultivation had reached the peak, the 9th level of the Mahayana realm. He had even surpassed this level and reached an even more mysterious level. Tang Jing's head moved. When he was in the Suicide Valley, Tang Jing had learned about it from the ancestor. The cultivation levels of the sky beyond heaven were the same as those of the mortal world. Back then, the ancestor and Hao Tianwang were both at the 8th stage of the Mahayana realm, while the late emperor was at the 9th stage of the Mahayana realm. During the chaos back then, although the ancestor had managed to preserve his life, he had also suffered heavy injuries. As a result, he had fallen ill and his cultivation had plummeted, making it difficult for him to reach his former peak state. Hao Tianwang was obviously luckier than the ancestor. Not only had he seized the world, his cultivation had also increased greatly. Chapter 1531. Little White's face was gloomy. After hearing Mi Wu's words, his heart seemed to sink into a bottomless abyss. He stubbornly said, "So what if his cultivation has increased? I will still kill him and avenge my clan." Xiaobai had lost his mind, but Tang Jing could not. Otherwise they would all be wiped out. He wouldn't do such a thing to hurt his loved ones and delight his enemies. "Xiaobai, this day will eventually come, but the enemy is too strong. We have to think of another way," Tang Jing earnestly advised. Xiaobai felt sullen. He looked at Tang Jing unwillingly. In the end, he had no choice but to lower his head. This was reality. If he wanted revenge, he had to swallow this anger. "Kill!" A burst of battle cries came from below. The Imperial Guards had actually caught up. Although many of them were left behind, there were still some outstanding ones who caught up. Little White's anger had nowhere to be vented. Looking at the Imperial Guards rushing over like a tidal wave, it found an outlet to vent its anger. "I can't kill that traitor for now. Then I'll kill you traitors' lackeys first." Xiaobai left the palace. Without the mysterious power suppressing him, his battle power had increased greatly. Furthermore, he had the bloodthirsty scepter. Suddenly, balls of flames flew out from the somersault cloud. They filled the sky and landed on the Imperial Guards. The flames were like rain falling from the sky. They were densely packed and covered the sky, dyeing the entire sky red. The Imperial Guards who were not strong enough were immediately hit by the flames. They burned fiercely and fell from the sky. They were like meteorites falling from the sky. It was a magnificent sight. The Imperial Guards who were lucky enough to avoid the flames still had lingering fear. However, they did not retreat and rushed to the bottom of the somersault cloud. "Die!" Xiaobai roared. The bloodthirsty scepter shone brightly and turned into thousands of blood threads that fell from the sky. Puff puff puff. The blood threads pierced through the chests of the Imperial Guards and instantly absorbed all of their blood. The bloodthirsty scepter seemed to have been nourished by the blood, and it shone even brighter and more powerful. Instantly, even more Imperial guards were killed by the bloodthirsty scepter. In the Imperial city, everyone walked onto the streets. They raised their heads and looked at the tragic scene in the sky in horror. The Imperial city had been peaceful for countless years. Most people thought that the Imperial city would always be peaceful, and that it would be difficult to cause any more waves. At the very least, this scene would not have happened. But they were completely wrong. This scene was happening right in front of their eyes. It was like a dream, but it was reality. Bloodthirsty scepter. Suddenly, a surprised roar sounded in Sky City. A figure flew up from the ruins and slowly rose into the air. He didn't seem to be moving very fast, but he passed by the Imperial guards one after another. As for those wailing Imperial guards, he didn't even look at them. It was as if he didn't care about their lives at all. Whoosh! The flames flew past him, but they instantly froze and turned into a large block of ice. The flames seemed to be still burning, but they were separated by a layer of ice. This scene was very strange. Hao Tianwang. Xiaobai saw the person clearly. It was actually Hao Tianwang. His eyes immediately turned red as if they were about to spit out flames. Boom! His whole body ignited in flames and he quickly recovered his true form. His huge body looked down at Hao Tianwang, and his monstrous aura was like rolling flames that pounced towards Hao Tianwang. This aura disappeared in front of Hao Tianwang as if it had never appeared. The distance between the two sides was quickly shortened. Hao Tianwang's gaze fell on Xiaobai, and a strong killing intent flashed in his eyes. He said calmly, "So it's a remnant of the past. It's a pity that you didn't hide properly and came to Sky City to seek your own death. You traitor, I'm going to kill you." Xiaobai roared in anger. Hao Tianwang was unmoved and said with disdain, "Compared to your father, you're too weak. You're as violent as a child and you can't even withstand a single blow." As soon as his voice fell, Hao Tianwang's gaze fell on the bloodthirsty scepter. He was unwilling to look away, and a look of realization appeared on his face. Back then, I lied to him about a divine weapon. I never thought that the legendary divine weapon would actually exist. The bloodthirsty scepter, the legendary divine weapon, the symbol of power. Just where did you find it? Don't even think about knowing the answer. Do you think a traitor like you can have the bloodthirsty scepter? Xiaobai angrily rebuked. Hao Tianwang coldly smiled and said, "Right now I am the person with the most power in sky beyond heaven. The bloodthirsty scepter should naturally be mine. Didn't you steal your power from the imperial family? And you used underhanded methods to do so. Aha, the winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. As for the process, is it important?" Hao Tianwang retorted. "Of course it's important." "It's not important," Hao Tianwang retorted. "No matter where you found the bloodthirsty scepter, since it has already appeared in front of me, then don't even think about taking it away. Moreover, you can't take it away. Today we'll settle our grudges from back then, and let the imperial family completely disappear from this world." As soon as Hao Tianwang's voice fell, a mysterious energy spread out, and the sky seemed to freeze, and the air seemed to solidify. Xiaobai had been waiting for a chance to face off against Hao Tianwang, so how could he let go of such a good opportunity? Thus, he desperately circulated all of the energy in his body, wanting to use a big move to deal with Hao Tianwang. What's going on? Suddenly, he cried out in alarm as he discovered that his energy was not flowing smoothly at all. That mysterious energy was suppressing him again. His pupils shrank as he stared at Hao Tianwang in disbelief. "It's you." The answer had already been revealed. Previously in the palace, it was Hao Tianwang's mysterious energy that suppressed Xiaobai's energy. At this moment, Hao Tianwang used the same trick again, and Xiaobai could not even use an effective attack. Hao Tianwang proudly looked at him and said, "Do you understand now? What did you do?" Xiaobai asked in bewilderment. Tang Zheng and the others could not hide their shock. Just what did Hao Tianwang do to be able to suppress Xiaobai's energy? Hao Tianwang casually said, "I already expected that the remnants of the imperial family would not be reconciled and would make a comeback. Thus, after being in closed-door cultivation for so many years, I finally created a divine ability to deal with your imperial family. This way my descendants and I will always be in an invincible position." Humph, the imperial family still wants to make a comeback, but that's just sending themselves to death, ha. Hao Tianwang's laughter echoed in the air, But Xiao Bai's heart slowly sank until it sank into a bottomless abyss. Tang Zheng's heart also suddenly sank. Hao Tianwang did not die but deliberately faked his death. In reality he was in closed-door cultivation, deliberately creating a divine ability that could suppress the imperial family. No, this was no longer a simple suppression but a complete suppression. Chapter 1532. Hao Tianwang's words were equivalent to a death sentence for the imperial family, so it was easy to imagine how Xiao Bai felt. He angrily roared, his voice echoing in the sky, filling every corner of Sky City and the imperial city. The angrier Xiao Bai was, the happier Hao Tianwang was. This was the effect he wanted. He coldly looked at Xiao Bai and said, "So, go die." That mysterious power arrived in front of Xiao Bai, and in the next second, it seemed like it would pierce through his body. "Stop." An angry roar rang out. At this critical moment, Tang Jing finally made his move. Previously he had been accumulating his strength and at the same time he wanted to obtain more information from Hao Tianwang. Heaven and earth merge. A thunderous roar burst out from his mouth, like a series of claps of thunder, layer upon layer, continuously descending from the sky. Shua shua. One sword pointed to the sky, the other to the earth. Two sword lights pierced into the sky and in an instant a change occurred. Half of a yin and yang fish appeared in the sky, the yang fish, while the other half rose from the ground, the yin fish. One black and 100, the two yin and yang fishes quickly merged as if heaven and earth were also merging. A world-destroying pressure fell on Hao Tianwang's body. His expression suddenly changed and he cried out in alarm, "What's going on?" With his cultivation and strength he still felt threatened, which showed how terrifying this attack was. He saw through Tang Zheng's cultivation, so he was very surprised that the other side could burst out with such a powerful force. "You killed my three-headed centipede mount and you still want to fight me? Death is not to be regretted." The surging mysterious power split into two, one attacking Xiao Bai, the other attacking Tang Zheng. Although it was split into two, its killing power was still very strong. Even with White E's strength, it was still suppressed by the mysterious power of its sworn enemy. It couldn't move at all. Heaven and earth merged and yin and yang merged. The yang fish and yin fish merged into one, and the mysterious power was completely suppressed within the yin and yang fish. A wave of energy rushed between the yin and yang fish. Roar. Xiao Bai roared and the bloodthirsty scepter shone brightly. The bloody lines that were dancing in the air all flew back, forming a dome that enveloped Xiao Bai. Suddenly he felt his whole body relax and the influence of that mysterious power seemed to have been weakened. His eyes were as bright as the stars and he was overjoyed. He knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that he couldn't miss. Therefore he spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood flew directly onto the bloodthirsty scepter, and the bloody light became even brighter, dyeing half the sky red. Boom. With two loud booms, the yin-yang fish and the dome exploded together. The shockwave formed a huge black hole in the sky. The sky seemed to have collapsed. Part of the shockwave went up while the other part went down. Other than Hao Tianwang, who was not affected, the rest of the imperial guards fell from the sky like meteorites. Half of the palaces in the Sky City were destroyed as if they were rotten wood. Mournful screams rang out one after another. The Sky City was on the verge of collapse as if it was going to fall from the sky. The light pillar that connected the Sky City and the Imperial City was also wavering, and it was in imminent danger. The somersault cloud also suffered a huge impact. Originally, the somersault cloud could offset most of the power and not be affected too much. However, at the critical moment, Tang Jing didn't let the somersault cloud do that. Instead, he let the somersault cloud borrow the power of the shockwave and directly rush into the collapsed sky. The scene in front of them disappeared and they fell into darkness. They couldn't even see their fingers if they stretched out their hands. The surroundings were dead silent and there wasn't even a sound. Everyone was dumbfounded, but they couldn't see anything. Tang Zheng and Little White had not calmed down the waves in their hearts, and cried out in alarm at the same time, "Space door!" The impact of that attack was too strong, and it greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. It actually tore through space and created a spatial door. As this was a spatial door created by the shockwave, it disappeared as quickly as it appeared. If Tang Jing hadn't let the somersault cloud take advantage of the situation, and used the power of the shockwave to fly into the sky, he wouldn't have accidentally entered the spatial door. Hao Tianwang watched as the somersault cloud and the few people disappeared into the pitch-black collapsed sky. Suddenly he raised his eyebrows and realized that things were beyond his imagination. He turned pale with fright and cried out, "Spatial door." Only then did he realize that his opponents had completely disappeared into the spatial door. It wouldn't be that easy to chase after them. He also had a lingering fear. The attack just now was too strong, so it tore through the spatial door. He wanted to chase after them, but it was already too late. Hao Tianwang's eyes flickered as he stared blankly at the sky. In fact, he was already thinking quickly. With the strength of those guys, it's impossible for them to open the spatial door. Therefore, they will only be lost in the turbulence of time and space and exhaust their lives. They won't be able to threaten me anymore. Hao Tianwang was no stranger to the spatial door. Back then he had personally opened the spatial door and sent Xian Yin and the others away. However, he didn't have much understanding of the spatial laws at that time. Today his cultivation was almost at the Great Circle, so he had a deep understanding of the spatial laws. He didn't believe that those two fellows could freely open a space door with just their cultivation. Hao Tianwang's strength was already so strong, so he could naturally open the spatial door. However, he had to bring many people through the spatial door, so he couldn't do that. This was because the spatial door couldn't be maintained for too long. Why didn't he chase after them? This was because even if he chased after them and opened the spatial door at the same place, he wouldn't be able to enter and catch them. A person couldn't step into the same river at two different times. By the same principle, the world behind the spatial door was flowing. A person couldn't step into the same place at different times to find them. Therefore, he didn't chase after them in a panic. That would cause his men's morale to be greatly disrupted. The disappearance of their commander was a great taboo. As a person who had been on the battlefield for countless years, how could he not understand this principle? However, he was rather dissatisfied that he didn't personally kill Xiao Bai, a surviving member of the imperial family. As for Tang Jing, he was also rather shocked and even fearful. With such a cultivation, he could unleash such a terrifying attack. In the future, he would definitely become even more powerful. In that case, he would have another very powerful opponent. This was something that he absolutely couldn't allow to happen. "Father." King Wuling flew over. After witnessing the scene just now, his heart was beating wildly and he was extremely excited. He was a little scared. Fortunately, his father had come out of seclusion. Otherwise, with his cultivation, he might not have been able to gain an advantage in this battle. "Father, they're seeking their own deaths. They escaped into the spatial door. We don't have to do anything. They're dead for sure." King Wuling was resolute and decisive as he spoke with a murderous aura. Hao Tianwang was deep in thought, but he really couldn't think of any way to refute. According to his judgment, that group of people definitely couldn't leave the spatial door. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.